Wind whispered across the stone battlements of Riverrun that evening, carrying with it the mingled scents of river mist and the faintest trace of pine smoke from distant heath fires. Below the ramparts the tumblestone murmured its eternal song, moonlight trembling across the black glass of the current. Robb Stark stood alone at the Merlin, wolf's cloak about his shoulders, gray eyes fixed upon the silver thread of water. In the courtyard far below, torchbearers moved in slow procession toward the gatehouse, each flame a fragile petal of light turning in the soft night breeze, heralding the arrival of banners that bore emerald rose and golden sword entwined. He felt the moment as one might sense the shifting of a season, the hush of expectant men, the creak of gate chains, the long sigh of timbers conceding passage. His mind, sharper than the chill air, returned to the letter sealed in dark green wax that had traveled from Highgarden through camps and castles and ambush-strewn roads. Willed by Olenna Tyrell, written in the measured script of Lord Mace, carried at last to Riverrun by Ser Garland the Gallant, it spoke of alliance born of shared enemies, of grain ships to feed the north when next winter's full fury fell, of coin to pay sellswords and mend breastplates, of barrels flush with arbor gold for restless soldiers. Yet for Robb it had come down to a single line, penned almost as an afterthought. And should it please his grace, our daughter Marjorie is unwed. In 7 short words the Reach had offered him not only a bride, but the might of 200,000 swords, the fertile granaries of the south, and a lever with which to pry open a war grown stubborn and jagged. And in truth, something more whispered beneath the parchment, a chance to bind wounds rent in his army's heart long before they could fester. He wondered, did the gods play at Sivas upon the roofs of heaven? Had they moved him across the board from the first raven-winged note of war, or was choice still his to claim? He thought of Talisa Mager, kind-eyed healer, her laughter a startled bird when he attempted humor amid the stench of sawdust and blood. The warmth of her hand lingered, a dangerous longing, but he folded that ache away as Maester Luwin might fold and seal a troubling letter. For a king must weigh lives against hopes, kingdoms against the quick pulse of the heart. Boots approached, light yet sure. Catelyn Stark's shadow lengthened beside him, the mother's face caught between torch glow and moonshine. "You have decided," she said softly. Not question, but knowledge born of a mother's gaze. "I have," Robb answered, voice low. "At dawn the ravens fly. Lord Tyrell will have my consent, and with it the North's pledge of friendship." Catelyn studied the stars where they pooled like grains of shattered ice across the heavens. "A lady of the Reach will bring songs and supple words to winter soil," she murmured. "But roses bear thorns, and every thorn has its price. We pay either with coin and vows, or with blood at the twins," he replied. "I have wronged Lord Walder once, yet even should he smile and seat us at his high table, the Frey levy cannot match the host Highgarden offers. Marjorie's dowry is wheat, gold, and knights in glittering columns. And Highgarden's ships will shorten half a continent. Then send thanks to the crone for wisdom," his mother said, though her tone carried an undertow of sorrow. "But remember the maid as well, for you will break a maiden's heart tonight." Robb closed his eyes, felt the cold bite. Talisa is brave. She will endure. And in silence he prayed that the 7 in their mercy would teach him to endure as well. The godwood of Riverrun knew many secrets, its oaks and elms and solemn weirwood older than Tully pride. On the morn of the departure ravens clattered through icy branches while Robb knelt before the heart tree, hand resting upon his sword's wolf-head pommel. The red leaves stirred, each one an open eye stitched in blood. His prayer was no grand oration, only the quiet hum of a son asking an absent father to guide a king. When he rose, Catelyn waited nearby, cloak dusted by frost, cheeks drawn and fierce. With her stood Ser Brynden Blackfish, gray of hair, gray of grin, a man whose eyes missed nothing and whose counsel cut clean as a barber's razor. "You ride south with me, uncle," Robb commanded. "Aye." The Blackfish tapped 2 fingers to the pommel of his sword. "The Reach is fox country. Best bring a hound. And wolves, if the hound falters," Catelyn added. She drew Robb close, hands framing his face. Lines of worry bracketed her mouth, yet her eyes shone proud. "Win them, Robb. Win them with honor, with justice. Remind them that the North keeps its oaths." "I will," he swore, tasting winter on the promise. Their column spilled from Riverrun's gates beneath gray banners of dire wolf and trout entwined. Robb rode at the van with gray wind at his heel, the dire wolf pacing silent and sure-footed. Sunlight crept shyly through tattered cloud as the host turned south along the King's Road, 5,000 mounted in spear-length files, 6,000 foot behind, crossbows and supply wagons rattling. Ox carts bore barrels of river trout packed in salt, kegs of stout from the twins, and a long train of master smiths hammering shields in transit. Red wine galleys would meet them at Maidenpool, but the Tyrells had insisted upon a gesture of plenty. 20 wagons heavy with reach cornflour and barley had already begun the climb from Bitterbridge, bound north as token of good faith. Robb spent his first night in a nameless meadow where daisies bobbed pale heads through frost. By the second he bivouacked outside Stony September, remembered for banners draped in silence about dead Prince Rhaegar. The locals eyed the dire wolf standard with quiet dread. Memories of Dragonfire still haunted the stone lanes, but Robb bought their peace with coin and grain. By day he pored over maps spread across makeshift tables, highways, lesser roads, river crossings. Ser Brynden argued for a bold thrust to Bitterbridge to meet the Tyrell vanguard near the Mander and set fear in Lannister hearts. Catelyn, ever the river's daughter, urged caution: do not outrun your Ravenwings, be certain of Highgarden's oath before you show your throat. Robb listened, weighed, and at dusk would slip from the war tents to walk among cook fires, speaking with pikemen of White Harbor and hill clansmen from the stony barrows north of Moat Cailin. Their hopes clung to him like smoke: an end to war, safe roads for children, the freedom of brothers lost at Whispering Wood. Talisa's name rose now and again at such fires, for her leechcraft had spared more than blade or steel could count. Yet when a Northman asked of her, Robb spoke gently of her decision to remain in Riverrun's infirmary, administering poultices to the maimed and fevered. Every telling tasted of ash. 6 days south of the Blackwater, the first Tyrell outriders appeared, storm of green cloaks, conical helms catching sun like burnished stones. Trumpets cried a jaunty tune, and their commander, Ser Loras Tyrell, cantered forward beneath a gilt rose the size of a kite shield. He was slender as a reed, yet moved with the sure poise of a stag upon fresh snow. Kinsmen, he greeted, though the blood they shared was distant as rumor. My lady sister bids me guard your grace to Bitterbridge, where our father and grandmother hold court. Robb dismounted, met the Knight of Flowers upon common earth. He clasped the offered forearm with soldier's grip, the handshake of equals. The North is honored, he replied, and those words carried across fields now blossoming with new banners, the White Star of the Craycalls, the Griffin of the Cunningtons lending token companies, even the Red Apple of Fossaway swirling in orchard-sweet air. That night 2 armies camped in uneasy embrace. Wolves snarled at pennants trimmed in gold lace, and Tyrell courtiers gaped half-shocked at shaggy Northmen sharpening axes beside carcasses of freshly skinned boar. Yet Robb enacted a firm decree: no man was to draw blood upon a Tyrell, nor voice insult beneath his banners. Violators would lose fingers at dawn. The Reach, for its part, furnished each northern mess with casks of chilled cider and wheels of golden cheese. Bread ovens glowed, and somewhere in the mingled haze of firelight a harp and fiddles found common rhythm. Spices unknown to Winterfell colored the smoke. For one strange, fragrant evening, war seemed a distant echo. Robb watched all with silent appraisal. Bonds forged in mead and laughter would temper steel better than any smith, yet each grin might mask an unsheathed ambition. At the edge of the revel he found Ser Loras conferring with Ser Garland, their words hushed. You fear we are but sweet wine for bitter throats, Robb remarked. Loras stiffened, then managed a courteous bow. We fear only that time favors lions. King's Landing is 2 weeks' march. Lord Tywin raises levies in the west and calls banners from Old Oak and Ashford. If we squander daylight, we may gift him the field. And if we hurry, Robb countered, we risk dividing my host from our baggage and leaving the north to starve next winter. Victory empty of life is defeat by another name. He paused. But I will heed your counsel, sir. At dawn we ride hard for Bitterbridge. The meeting at Bitterbridge unfolded beneath towering pavilions striped rose and cream. Inside, carpets the hue of ripe plums softened the tread of steel-shod feet, and tables overflowed with spun sugar swans, quail glazed in orange blossom honey, lanterns wrought like lilies. Olenna Red Wine, called the Queen of Thorns, occupied a carved elm chair at the center, her sharp eyes plucking details from each approaching lord as a sparrow might glean seeds from chaff. Robb kneeled upon entrance, though he wore a crown of dark bronze about his brow. Lady Olenna, he proclaimed, I am come as wolf and king, but I set aside the lash of war if peace may grow. The crone peered over her spectacles. Peace grows from manure, your grace. We shall see what fruit this heap bears. She waved a gnarled hand. Rise and break bread, though I warn you, southern loaves may stick in a northern throat. Laughter rippled like covert thunder. Mace Tyrell, florid of face and brocade, bustled forth to welcome their guest. Ser Garland and dozens of lesser cousins filled the tent's margins, flanked by maesters, septons, Tyrell captains draped in green lamellar armor studded with gold. Catelyn Stark took her place at Robb's side, while the Blackfish lingered near a wine cask, hawk-eyes sweeping for hidden daggers. Margaery Tyrell entered last. Silk the color of dawn clung to her slender frame, embroidered with silver petals that seemed to sway with each step. A perfume of jasmine drifted in her wake, but it was the steady light behind her hazel eyes that caught Robb's breath. She moved with a dancer's measure, bowing first to Catelyn, then to Robb, offering him an open palm. "My lord," she began, voice lilting as river water over smooth stones, "may our houses bloom in unbroken summer." Robb took her hand. Summer is long overdue. Negotiations sprawled across 3 days and candle-heavy nights. Catelyn quarreled with Lord Mace on the wording of joint sovereignty. Ser Brynden wrangled over troop dispositions along the Blackwater. Maester Vyman measured the weight of dowry chests and the reach of Tyrell warships. Through it all, Olenna flicked barbs at half the realm. Lannister wit is rarer than an honest fry, and won concessions with each sting. Yet even her sharpness softened when she observed Robb sparring with Ser Loras in dawn's pale hush, swords ringing a crisp melody. Late on the second night, Robb slipped into the orchard that fringed the camp, white blossoms drifting like lazy snow around the dark crown of his hair. There he found Margaery seated upon a low stone wall, hands folded in her lap. "Your men feast," she said without turning. "'Tis said Northmen drink to keep the night at bay. What does a king drink each eve before wedding vows?" "Uncertainty," Robb replied, leaning beside her. "And hope enough to sweeten it." She laughed, the sound bright yet tempered by something like sadness. "Hope is a coin that spends quickly in war. I have seen its purse emptied more than once." Robb studied her profile, soft curve of cheek, determined mouth, the small scar at her temple half hidden beneath curling brown hair. Scars told stories better than singers without gilding. "I would learn where you earn that mark," he said. "In Old Town I once climbed the roof of the starry September," she answered. "I wished to see the ocean silver under moonlight. The tiles were slick." She touched the scar lightly. "I learned that heights are less forgiving than dreams, yet the view was worth every drop of blood." Robb felt the orchard hush settle. A queen who bleeds for her view. The North will hail that courage. "May they find it useful," she whispered. Then she turned, eyes alight. "And you, my king, will you find it dangerous?" He could not form answer, for the petals chose that moment to fall by dozens, swirling about them in fragrant hush. He brushed one from her sleeve. Their fingers grazed, and the orchard's nightingales seemed to hold a collective breath. On the feast of the first moon of harvest, bannermen, knights, septons, and sworn swords gathered beneath a vast pavilion strewn with roses, wolf's head, and trout banners entwined. The septon's voice rose in solemn cadence, binding Robb Stark and Margaery Tyrell in holy matrimony. Dire wolf howls mingled with the cheers of reach lords. Catelyn wept quietly, the whether for joy or sorrow even she might not have known. Olenna dabbed discreetly at her eyes, complaining of dust. A battle horn sounded in triumph, another answered from the west. The armies of Wolf and Rose marched at dawn, bound for the Blackwater in double column, green beyond imagining threaded now with somber gray. Squires scurried, polishing helms, cooks wrapped loaves in linen, ravens leapt skyward bearing word of the grand union toward distant Moat Cailin and even the wall itself. In King's Landing, bells tolled in warning as news arrived upon sweat-streaked couriers. The young wolf had found a bride, and with her a host to blot out fields of red flowers never yet plucked. Tywin Lannister received that tidings at Derry, his war council strewn with ciphered dispatches. His fist tightened upon a lion-headed cane. So the boy turned south with Highgarden at his back, he growled. He trades one freckled healer for a cord of scheming petals. Fool! Yet in his eyes kindled grudging respect. He called for Ser Kevin, for ravens to Casterly Rock, for emissaries to Sunspear, any ripple that might fracture this new green tide. At the twins, Lord Walder's cup slipped from his grasp, wine-staining furs. Harsh laughter bubbled from cracked lips. Clever wolf, he rasped, but every bridegroom must cross a bridge. He set quill to parchment, inviting Roose Bolton to charm dread from cold Northman hearts. The march upon King's Landing became a living river. 20,000 northern foot with spear and shield, 15,000 reach knighthood in quilted surcoats smelling of lilac and steel, lumbering siege towers, carts heavy with stone shot, lumber for catapults that would scar the Red Keep's proud ramparts. Scouts rode like dragonflies, mapping mills and ferries, while on every hilltop banners sprouted Wolf's Grey and Tyrell Green twisting against a sky grown luminous with early autumn. Robb rode often with Marjorie at his side, the Queen of the North in a riding cloak the hue of deep forest, bronze dire wolves sewn at hem and collar. She learned the names of each outrider, spoke kindly to hedge knights thin of purse. The men from White Harbor began carving roses upon their shields beside the gray of the wolf, while Reach Lancers braided bits of wolf fur into their horses' manes. Where unity had seemed fragile, camaraderie flared like torchlight in growing dusk. Yet in every campfire's glow lurked rumor dark as crow feathers. Lord Walder Frey had taken ill of slight, they said, closing his gates to all but his own. Roose Bolton's levies lingered at the neck, their crimson banners slow to muster, and whispers told of Sells-word companies invited from Mere, captained by men whose loyalty could be bought thrice in one day. Robb listened, absorbing each word into a quiet labyrinth of possibilities. At midnight he wrote long letters to Riverrun, to Lysa's name scripted first, though he never sent those, and to Torgan Karstark in the north, to Lady Meege Mormont upon Bear Isle. Guard Moat Caelan. Strengthen the neck. Should southern alliances crumble, the north must hold fast as Winterhearth. 3 leagues from the Blackwater, the combined army halted on the Hill of Hammers. From its summit Robb beheld the sprawl of King's Landing under late sun, city walls like cracked bone, smoke from 1,000 chimneys, the red keep a blood-red shadow atop Aegon's lofty hill. The Blackwater Bay gleamed coppery, cluttered with sails, Lannister, red wine, and others unnamed. War waited below like a beast in chains, biding its chance. Robb summoned his captains, arrayed them in semicircle about a map pinned with colored knives. Ser Garland Tyrell would break upon the King's Gate with Reach infantry, scaling ladders honeyed with promise of gold. Ser Brynden Blackfish would will longbow companies to Rain Gate, cutting supply by boat. Great John Umber and his berserk spears would probe the Lion Gate under Midnight's cloak, screaming for the old gods. And Robb himself, with the Knight of Flowers and 1,000 Northman cavalry, would circle to the south, striking the Dragon Gate at dawn from behind a thunder of hoofs. As the sun dipped, Catelyn clasped Robb's arm. "The city is a pit of vipers," she warned. "Do not lose yourself within its smoke." "I will not enter until its gates open of their own accord," he assured her. "We fight for justice, not for towers of redstone. And if justice hides behind wildfire, then we quench the flames with courage." She managed a weary smile, then pressed a small rune-carved charm into his palm. "From the crypts of Winterfell. Your father carried it at the Trident." Robb swallowed, closed fingers around the smooth bit of stone. "Then it carries blood enough for 2 rivers." The first assault fell upon a dawn shrouded in silver fog. Arrows shrieked from city walls, clattering upon raised shields. Tyrell ladders scraped limestone like claws upon slate, grapnels bit deep. Over the roar, Reach trumpets blared their bright challenge, and the ground shook beneath the thunder of Umber warhorns. Catelyn watched from a command ridge, knuckles white upon a spyglass, as the Blackfish's longbowmen loosed black storms that sent Lannister banners toppling like autumn leaves. Within the Dragon Gate, gold cloaks rallied behind kettle drums, but their line faltered as Robb and Loras cut through the first barricade, dire wolf and rose pennants streaming. Grey wind tore past barricades, felling pikemen with the inevitability of storm surge. On third pass the gate's great oak beams splintered, and the iron portcullis groaned upward, seized by traitor hands from within. None could say in the fury, only that a gap yawned wide and the young wolf howled victory. Queen Cersei's courtiers would recall seeing smoke rise from the Sept of Baelor, thick with incense and fear. Tywin Lannister was a week's ride away, still marshalling columns near Harrenhal. Tyrion barred within the Hand's Tower, his chain across the river unfinished. Luke D upon the charging tide and tasted bitter copper. And in deep vaults beneath the Red Keep, pyromancers huddled before green casks, awaiting the Queen Regent's desperate seal. But before wildfire could claim dawn, the mud gate shuddered open from inward push, and a riot of small folk surged outward. Peasants, gutter children, washerwomen, all clutching crude flags daubed with rose and wolf. Some bore bread loaves broken in half, Tyrell stores smuggled into hovels. Others chanted the names of dead laborers who had starved, while Lannister galleys hoarded grain for the court. The gold cloaks balked, unwilling to butcher their own. By 7th hour bells told surrender. A company of lion banners cast down arms before Garland Tyrell, and Septons rushed to ring the great September spells in plea for mercy. The Red Keep alone remained, its crimson ramparts defended by the Hound and the last of Joffrey's guards. From the city's shattered east wall Marjorie Tyrell entered astride a white palfrey, olive cloak billowing, lips moving in song to calm the masses. Women reached to touch her hand, children cried blessing, even broken men upon makeshift crutches straightened at her passing as if to honor a hope newly born. Robb found her in the shadow of the dragon pit's broken dome. Soot smeared her cheeks, yet her smile was sunrise. "King's Landing bends," she whispered. "Bend it kindly, my love." He clasped her hand. "I will." On the 8th day of the siege, Lord Tywin rode hard from the north only to find the Lion Gate hung with dire wolf pelts and fields beyond sown thick with Tyrell tents. Scouts galloped back with fractured tales of wildfire stalks emptied by surrender, of Joffrey spirited away by Varys, of Cersei sealed in her chamber with bitter tears. Tywin's jaw clenched like a bear trap. He reckoned numbers, weighed hostages, calculated gold. But before he could commit to night assault, ravens beat their black wings across dusk. Dorne had pledged neutrality, the Vale stirred, and in the Riverlands the Freys debated whether to side with victors or hide behind Old Stone. The old lion paused, and the pause became retreat. The game required fresh pieces now. In the throne room, its towering iron spires shivering in candlelight, Robb Stark set no blade across Joffrey's throat. Instead, he sent the boy king to Casterly Rock as hostage under firm escort. Catelyn Stark whispered that hostage kings were seeds of future wars, yet Robb held to the counsel of his new queen: spare the cub, restrain the lion. A fortnight later, Robb knelt before the weirwood throne hastily carved within the godwood of the Red Keep, a pale sentinel tree transplanted from the Riverlands, its red leaves dripping dew like tears. There he swore oath to rule the 7 kingdoms in justice, to keep winter's memory alive in summer hearts, and to honor the reach whose rose now entwined the wolf. Marjorie stood beside him, crowned with a circlet of white winter roses and obsidian dire wolf fangs. Bells rang pure and high, echoing the promise across rooftops and river. Yet the realm was not healed with a wedding kiss. In Pike, Balon Greyjoy claimed crowns of salt and rock, his longships raiding from the arbor to the rills. In Dreadfort's dim halls, Roose Bolton weighed letters sealed with Frey blue, his pale eyes calculating old grudges. Dragons stirred in the east, invisible yet inevitable, while beyond the wall a cold wind howled through dead forests. Robb sensed the quiver of coming storms even as he walked the gardens with Marjorie, their hands intertwined among lemon trees. Her laughter wove a net of warmth about his heart, but his gaze returned always to the horizon. There, where sea met sky, he thought he could see shapes rising, a kraken's tentacles, the glint of Bolton eyes, wings black as midnight. He tightened his grip upon his queen's fingers. "We will meet them together," she vowed, reading his thoughts. "Rose and Wolf, Root and Fong," he answered, and kissed away the taste of winter on her lips. Moon after moon turned. Highgarden grain filled King's Landing cellars, northern firs warmed children along Flea Bottom's alleys. The Tyrell fleet patrolled the narrow sea while Northmen drilled upon the Rose Road alongside Sons of the Reach. The Iron Bank's emissaries arrived to renegotiate debts, charmed by delicate courtesies of the Queen of Thorns. For a fleeting breath, the realm inhaled peace. But peace in Westeros is a seed planted upon a battlefield, its roots must feed upon bones. Far to the west, a raven beat toward Riverrun bearing seals from Walder Frey and Roose Bolton announcing a wedding of their own, inviting the king in the south to cross the Twins come spring. In the Red Keep solar, Robb read the invitation thrice. Marjorie watched the candle flame dance behind his eyes. "Will you go?" she asked, voice careful. "I must," he answered. An insult left to fester breeds plague. He laid the parchment aside, rose to stand before the window where dusk bled violet. "But I will not travel blind. I will bring half the court and half the grain and all the honor we have forged. I will walk across that bridge not as suppliant, but as king." Marjorie stepped beside him, sliding her hand into his. "Let us sow roses upon the crossing, so even Frey feet recall the scent of summer." She paused. "And I will ride with you." Outside, the bells of sunset tolled, each note a question hanging over waters gone dark. Below in the yard, gray wind paced restless, nose to wind, as if catching scent of storms gathering far beyond the walls. Yet in the queen's words Robb heard the promise of steel beneath petal, of wind that might turn wolves into roses and roses into wolves anew. He drew her close, forehead to hers, and whispered the vow that had no witness but gods and ghosts. Together, the night embraced them with quiet wings, carrying their oath into the swirling maze of fate, where alliances bloom and thorns may yet draw blood, but from which hope, too, may rise, stubborn as a winter rose piercing snow. The first snows drifted down upon King's Landing in ghost-fine motes, so scant they vanished before touching the cobbles of the Red Keep's inner yard. Yet Robb felt their chill all the same. Winter's breath, faint but insistent, rode that pale dusting all the way from Skagos and the lonely hills, whispering of home. He tugged the fur-lined collar of his cloak higher as he strode across the frost-slick stones toward the great hall, gray wind padding at heel, muzzle steaming. 6 moons had passed since the city's gates surrendered to Wolf and Rose. 6 moons in which the realm had tasted something like calm, but calm was only the smoothest skin atop the deepest waters, and storm currents churned beneath. Inside, the hall thrummed with the clamor of a court newly roused. Torchlight gilded banners, dire wolf rampant beside Rose in full bloom, while attendants hurried with platters of smoked eel, carved boar, and mulled wine spiced with bittersweet orange. The air smelled of pine resin, split oak, a lick of sea salt swirling in from Blackwater Bay. Stark guards in gray cloaks and Reach Lancers in green brigandines mingled shoulder to shoulder, a living reminder of the wedding oath of harvest that had bound North and Reach before the Godswood's transplanted heart tree. Yet Robb sensed the small fissures already spiderwebbing beneath that bright veneer. Quarrels over ports and tariffs, jealous whispers about which knight rode nearest the king, tongue clacks over whose banners hung closest to the dais. Marjorie stood upon that dais now, pale rose velvet flowing from her shoulders, hands clasped at her waist as she listened to Lord Tarley enumerate grain tallies from the latest Reach convoy. Her posture, straight as a lance, projected unassailable poise, yet Robb, who had come to read the hush behind the melody of her voice, caught the faint quickening at the base of her throat. Even Rose Queen patience frayed when confronted by Randall Tarley's stentorian recitations, but the king arrived in time to spare her another stanza. "Tarley," Robb called, mounting the steps, "your ledgers do you honor, yet I would know their heart in fewer beats. Say but this, do we feed the realm this winter?" "Aye, your grace," the lord rumbled, voice echoing from breastplate. 300 granaries between Bitter Bridge and Maidenpool brimful. With modest rationing, the capital may endure 2 winters of ordinary length. Longer if the fisher fleets keep their catches steady, shorter if the river thaw is delayed. Marjorie caught Robb's eye, gifting him a flicker of gratitude for his rescue. He answered with the ghost of a grin. "Then the North thanks the Reach for its bread," he told Tarley, "and the king thanks you for your brevity." "Dismissed, my lord, with honor." When Tarley withdrew, Marjorie stepped nearer, lowering her voice beneath the susurrus of courtiers. "You have been at the docks since sunrise," she chided gently, smoothing wind-ruffled strands of auburn from his brow. "Even wolves must eat." "I ate a spray of salt," he said, tasting the memory of mist upon his lips. "Red wine captains report an ire-born longship shadowing their outbound traffic. Small, swift, emblazoned with a black octopus sigil-tipped silver." Marjorie's gaze skated toward the great doors as if half expecting the kraken itself to heave through. "The Greyjoys have grown bold since Pike crowned its own king. If Balon tests our lanes, he tests more than water." "Aye," Robb agreed. "He tests whether Wolf and Rose bleed in separate hues when pricked from opposite shores. I've ordered Ser Loras to double patrol between the Whispers and the Arbor, but I would send a northern captain as well, Lord Rygar Tallheart, perhaps. Let Knotted Pine and Greenheart Prowse sail side by side." He felt her fingers close, warm, upon his gauntlet. "That is well done," she murmured. "Yet my grandmother says alliances, like orchids, bloom best when watered from both sides. Would you dine with Lords Rowan and Tarley tonight? Speak of hunting rights and mill levies, assure them the Reach need not fear winter tariff on their cargoes as repayment." Robb smiled, though the smile carried weight. "You turn a wolf into a tradesman, my queen. I turn a kingdom towards spring," she countered, eyes bright, "even in earliest frost." That evening, as ravens ruffled feathers upon the rookery perches, a different bird found its way to the small council chambers. A hooded crow of parchment color, sealed with pink wax impressed by twin towers. Robb, flanked by Caitlin and Maester Gorman Tyrell, broke the seal beneath the flicker of green glass lanterns. The words inside were penned in a tight, spidery scrawl. "To His Grace, King Robb Stark of the North and the South, Queen Marjorie Tyrell, and their most honored court, the twins prepare to host a joining of houses. My sweet Eenies fry to wed Lady Rosalind Tully upon the first thaw. It wounds our aging heart that the Wolf King has yet to grace us with a visit after so momentous an alliance was pledged to House Tyrell. Therefore we extend this invitation that there be no lingering frost between Fry and Stark. Cross our bridge, feast at our table, and drink from our cellars. We will make old wrongs right. Walder Fry, Lord of the Crossing, Protector of the Rivers, etc. Catelyn's fingers tightened, crinkling the edges. "There is poison in the cup," she warned, eyes flaring storm gray. "My father pledged Rosalind elsewhere in childhood, yet Lord Walder claims her as coin. Rosalind is gentle, too gentle for Fry machinations. Yet if we refuse the invitation," Maester Gorman noted, stroking his neatly trimmed beard, "Lord Walder will bleat across every hearth that the King of Winterspike spurns bridge and bread. He may offer his toll booths to Lord Tywin next." "We hold the capital," Robb said, voice low. "Tywin holds fear. Freys love whoever marches nearest their moat." He looked to Catelyn. "I will go, but not blind. We travel with a train of hostages. 7 Freys already sit within these walls, fosterlings for good conduct." He met Maester Gorman's eye. "Send reply by dawn. We accept, bearing gifts of arbor gold and northern furs, and we require assurance that High Septon and maesters alike may witness the vows. No secret corners." A scrape of leather sounded beyond the council door, and Grey Wind's hackles lifted. Through the door slipped Ser Brynden Blackfish, cloak damp from the king's moat. He carried a second letter clamped in 2 fingers, scarlet wax bearing a flayed man. "Roose Bolton writes," the Blackfish announced without preamble. "He wishes leave to winter in the Drev Fort, pleading scarcity among his levies at the neck. Blames it on Ironborn raids." Catelyn exhaled a sigh that might have been wind snaking through Godswood branches. "Fry with his bridges. Bolton with his leeches. We stitch wolves to roses, but leeches still cling to fur." Robb skimmed the parchment. Roose's neat script, cordial as always, offering apologies and subtle jabs in equal measure. "He hunts opportunity," Robb muttered. "Boltons thrive on second blood." He glanced at the date. "Sent near a moon ago. Time enough for his banners to vanish into the snows." "Let them vanish," the Blackfish growled, crossing arms. "Flayed men rust slower when frozen. We have Tyrell steel now, red wine, oars, Manderley ships on loan. Bolton is a pouch of vipers we may crush when thaw returns." Catelyn met her uncle's gaze. "The vipers may bite first if ignored." To Robb she whispered, "Your father's banner men chose you at Winterfell. Lose them piecemeal and we fight our next war with Reach Pretties alone." Robb's thumb traced the rim of his crown. "I will send Lady Meage Mormont to the Dread Fort, a guest too fierce to slight. And Ser Wendell Manderley to Barrowton. Bolton will think twice if Mormonts and Manderleys sit by his hearth counting hides on the hall floor." Snow thickened over the next fortnight, frosting balustrades, turning gutters into white-skinned snakes. Marjorie's gardeners fought to keep lemon trees alive in iron braziers, feeding them coals through the night. In the Tower of the Hand, Robb convened with Garland Tyrell and Edmure Tully beside a broad sand table, placing painted figures upon carved ridges, kraken icons along the Shield Islands, lion heads massing at Harrenhal, flayed men poised at the neck. "Lord Tywin cannot cross the Mander without facing our fleet," Garland said, voice measured as blade angle. "But he travels light, strikes swift. Harrenhal's causeways house catapults enough to break us if we lay siege. We need allies in the Riverlands." Edmure raked fingers through copper beard. "Blackwoods and Brackens drown in their feud. My cousin Carol Vance holds Wayfarer's Rest, but his walls are cracked from last year's assault. I can muster 3,000, perhaps 4. Robb nudged a dire wolf token west, eyes narrowing on a painted sun over the King's Road. "Then we seek help where Tywin least expects. The Dornish still smart from lion claws at the Prince's Pass. If we promise them Myrcella for betrothal." Garland's brows rose. "Myrcella sits at Sunspear already. You would exchange Lannister hostage for spears?" "A lion cub caged in the desert is lever enough," Robb countered. "Send Ser Davos Sarsfield south with terms. Dorne marches slow, but their scorpions bite far. Tywin will think twice before pressing west when spears rise behind." He might have said more, but the door banged open and Clay Serwyn burst in, cheeks aflame. "A raven from the wall," the young lord gasped, clutching a frost-crusted scroll. "Scouts sight dead men walking again. Lord Commander begs steel and dragaglass." Silence dulled the hall, broken only by Grey Wind's low whine. Robb felt the hairs on his neck bristle, memory flashing. His brothers around Winterfell's hearth, Jon's dark eyes gleaming as he spoke of ancient tales. The others, the Night's Watch, cold things in the dark. Robb cracked the scroll, reading the night-black words. Rangers lost beyond the frostfangs. Blue-lit eyes. A plea written in ink so hurried it blurred. Edmure swallowed. Old Nan's ghosts. Real enough, Robb said, voice ironbound. Winterfell sent axes once. We will send them now. Bronze, flint, dragonglass arrowheads from Dragonstone's old hoards. And if I must, the Queen's own jeweler will chip Tyrell obsidian for blades. He turned to Clay. Dispatch ravens. Karstark, Umber, Mormont, Reed. 10 men from each house volunteer for the watch with supplies for 2 years. The wall stands or none of this matters. That night he found Marjorie in the solar of the Maiden Vault, windows latticed with ice crystals. She crouched over a low table strewn with parchments painted in delicate watercolors. Garden plans for Springrise, the green promenade she envisioned atop the city's crumbling southern walls. He knelt beside her, palms pressed to the floor's cold marble. War creeps like shadow, he said softly. Yet you sketch roses on stone. She set her brush down, wiped a smear of blue from her knuckle. Roses grow tallest where death has trod. I would carve a promise into the city skin, life after lions, after Ireborn, after snows. He watched the candle glow dance in her eyes. You carve hope sharper than any sword. He told her then of the wall, the shambling dead, the watchful others beyond mortal ken. Her fingers tightened around his as she listened. Then we must weave hope thicker, she whispered. Holdfasts are built of stone and men, one cracks, the other flees. But hearts are stitched of stories. Give the realm a tale that outlives these horrors. Robb pressed his brow to hers. I would weave a tale of peace, but threads keep fraying. His gaze drifted to her midsection where silk pressed flat. Someday a prince or princess may mend what we cannot. A crimson flush colored her cheeks, half surprise, half dawning warmth. The maester says time yet, but he is hopeful. She lifted his hand, set it over her heart. Promise me you will return from the twins, Robb. Promise our child will know its father before wolves must howl again. I promise. The word tasted of iron and prayer. He sealed it with a kiss soft as snowfall upon her temple and hoped the gods of north and south alike still cared for promises made in the hush before war. When the thaw finally crept across river and field, the riverlands awakened with a rattle of armor. Robb's procession crossed the Blackwater in gleaming array, 300 mounted Stark guards under Ser Helman Tall Heart, 200 Reach Knights under Ser Garland, helms lacquered green, 30 Queen's Guard in cloaks half white, half gray. A score of wagons loaded with casks of Dornish red and whole wheels of Silverhall cheese, 6 slender singers to sweeten Lord Frey's table, and Catelyn, Edmure, and the Queen's cousin Eleanor Tyrell riding behind in a velvet-roofed litter. Ahead, the twins of House Frey rose like mismatched jaws over the murky green fork, the stone east tower squat and pitted, the timber west tower recently refaced in pale pine. Bridge spans chained them together across sluggish current. Bunting of pale blue fluttered, and from the rampart flew banners of twin towers quartered with a running trout, borrowed Tully pride for the wedding show. Lord Walder himself awaited in the courtyard, skin like parchment half-scorched, watery eyes bright as coins never spent. He bowed awkwardly, all knobby knees and mock benign smile. King Wolf, he croaked. Queen Flower. We are honored, truly honored. Robb swung from saddle, the chill hammer of apprehension settling behind sternum. He forced a courteous nod. May the Seven bless this union. Lord Walder, and mend our old slights. So they may, so they may. The old man's grin widened. Come, shed cloaks, warm your feet. My grandsons shall see to your retinue. We dine soon, capon glazed in chestnut honey, trout stuffed with mint. The tourney lists open at dawn for any who would till. Men led horses away, barking commands in the thick mud accent of the crossing. Robb paced beside Catelyn beneath sagging archways hung with ivy. She eyed the rafters, the loops of red cloth above, the garlands of olives and apples strung from beams, symbols of reconciliation, yet the olives were half-withered, the apples pale. Within the great hall benches stretched end to end, already filling with gawky Frey youths in squires' tabards, their eyes darting from Northmen axes to reach brooches. Musicians strummed lutes from a wooden dais. 3 septons in cream robes recited blessing as servants poured hippocras into silver cups. Marjorie's litter arrived at the door. She emerged radiant in heavy fur-trimmed traveling gown the hue of frost-kissed lavender. Beside her, Lady Rosalind Frey, frail, slight, hair like corn silk, stepped timidly into the rush-strewn hall. When she saw Edmure, the girl's blush deepened to rose, and she dipped a curtsy so low her knees trembled. Edmure's smile, awkward yet earnest, softened Robb's unease. Perhaps love might sprout even in fry soil. The feast commenced with horn blasts, platters parading, pigeon pies shaped like lilies, onion tarts, river crabs shelled and buttered. Wine flowed, fry arbor red, tart and thin, followed by richer vintages from Highgarden cellars. Jokes broke ice, Ser Perwyn Fry mocking his own brother Olivar's ill-tuned singing voice, Ser Martin Lannister, hostage guest, praising Northman mead while wincing at its burn, Roose Bolton, absent, sent his bastard Ramsay in his stead, smirking like a cat among chicks. Robb noted that smirk and logged it, but the bastard bowed with ironic grace, presenting a gift, wolf pelts dyed crimson in honor of the Rose Wolf Union. Applause scattered, Catelyn's mouth flattened. Music swelled and dancing began. Robb partnered Margaery in a slow measure. Her palm in his steadied him, yet when he scanned the gallery he found certain crossbowmen perched in upper lofts, fry guards, perhaps, but arrows were notched though no boar rampaged. He traded glances with Ser Brynden, who stood near a pillar. The Blackfish's hand never left sword hilt. Walder Frey clapped cane upon table. "A betting," he screeched. "Bring forth bride and groom." Servants rushed to pluck Rosslyn and Edmure from dais, laughter rang, good-natured if rowdy. Robb relaxed a hair, an old Riverlands tradition, coarse but harmless. Rosslyn vanished on giggling shoulders, Edmure on boisterous ones. Wine goblets clinked. Then the doorposts shut with a thud echoing deeper than revelry. Music faltered. Pipes shrilled off-key. Walder rose slowly, cane rasping. "My lords," he said, voice suddenly clear as bell metal. "I give you all, the king in the north." Robb stiffened. His title spoken thus should have roused cheers, but hush pressed the hall. Walder's gaunt eyes glinted. "And has the king repaid his host for pardon of past discourtesy?" Robb's hand found sword belt, fingers brushing leather. "We have brought casks of arbor gold, Lord Walder, and promise of safe roads north. What more would you have?" Walder spread arms. "Only a song." He turned, nodding to the gallery. A fiddle struck discord, scraping 3 rapid notes. Robb recognized the tune in a heartbeat, the Rains of Castamere. Cold slammed his spine. Grey wind snarled, leaping forward. A quarrel snapped from above, wolf yelped, arrow lodged hollow between ribs. Chaos detonated, crossbow bolts sleet into ranks of Reach Knights, into Stark guards mid-chalice sip. Tables overturned, wine splashed like arterial spray. Screams tangled in rafters. Robb drew steel, bellowing, "Starks to me." Garland Tyrell leapt atop a trestle, shield up, sword whirling to deflect shaft after shaft. Brynden Blackfish gutted a Fry squire who lunged with stake knife. Catelyn ducked beneath a flying pewter flagon, seized a carving blade, slashed at a man grappling Robb's back. Robb glimpsed Lord Walder sidestep behind tall grandsons bearing pikes. Ramsay Snow danced amid corpses, laughing as he slit throats with curved dagger. Firelight flared as Cresset toppled, igniting rushes. Grey wind writhed, snapping at arrows protruding from hide. Robb's heart cracked, but he had no breath to mourn. A Fry captain swung axe, forcing him to parry. Iron rang, Robb riposted, severing the man's wrist. Blood sprayed across his wolf cloak. "Queen secure," he shouted toward the dais. But where? He spied Margaery pinned against a pillar, 3 armored Freys hemming her. Robb barreled through wreckage, shoulder-checked a table, grabbed a fallen spear. He rammed the butt into one assailant's helm, skull caved with wet crunch, twisted shaft to jab second in throat. Third raised mace, before he could strike, Garland's sword split the man from collarbone to sternum. Margaery lurched into Robb's arms, eyes wide but steady. "We run," she gasped, voice raw with smoke. Back door to the stables, Ser Tallheart guards it. They fought toward the rear arch. Catelyn joined them, face streaked red, clutching Grey Wind's ruff, wolf staggered but alive, snarling despite shafts. Half the hall burned now, Freys shouted orders above roar of flame. Some Reach Knights rallied into shield wall, edging toward side stairs. But bolts kept raining Fry archers upon the bridge outside, hidden vantage unseen. One struck Catelyn's upper arm, she bit back cry, snapped shaft, kept moving. Another pierced Robb's thigh, not deep through armor, but enough to stagger. Margaery braced him, eyes blazing. Outside, snowmelt rain hissed against hot stone. The courtyard was slaughterhouse, Stark guards cut down amid overturned wine carts, Tyrell lancers hamstrung, Freys chanting like crows on carrion. Yet beyond the drawbridge, Stark banners still camped, Tallheart's 100, Ser Wendell Manderly with 30 heavy horse. If Robb could reach them, a trumpet blared. Across the river, Second Fry Tower already bristled with crossbows trained on those tents. A horn answered, umber war horn, deep as mountain heart. Greatjon's roar carried, to me, you green-throated maggots. Northern tents erupted, men scrambling, seizing axes, rushing toward the bridge. Robb limped, Marjorie at flank, gray wind lunging at any fry near. Arrows zipped, he lifted shield, felt two thuds like hammer blows. Snow mixed with ash swirling under torch glare. By miracle they reached the stables. Tallheart, helm dented, hauled the door, two spearmen barred it behind. Horses screamed, stomping. Caitlin slashed a rope binding a destrier. Robb vaulted into saddle despite wound. Marjorie swung atop a palfrey. Caitlin mounted a rangy mare. Gray wind leapt to snap reins. Gatehouse left side. Tallheart barked, voice hoarse. Small postern unguarded. They thundered out, hooves striking cobbles. Flames reflected in puddles. Atop walls, Fry sentries loosed hasty bolts. But the gallop speed saved them. They burst through postern barely wide enough, into night air sharp with marsh stink. Beyond outer yard, Greatjon's contingent clashed with Fry men-at-arms. Axes rose and fell, crimsoning slush. Robb wheeled toward them. Greatjon spotted him, bared teeth in exultation. Kings under sky, he roared. Form wedge, carve path. Northern shields locked. Fry line faltered under the charge. Tyrell knights who escaped hall joined flank. Banners scorched, armor blackened but bright beneath soot. They hacked for passage. Bridge planks moaned under stampede of men and horses. Midspan, the trap was sprung. Chains rattled, drawbridge rose. Fry engineers cranked hidden winches, lifting planks. Men tumbled into river gap. Robb's stallion skidded. He yanked reins, barely halting before chasm. Fry jeers wailed from towers. Ashore behind them, more frays poured from gates, pushing, shouting, cutting down stragglers. Robb's company was pinned upon half-raised bridge, river churning below. Greatjon hefted battle-axe. Wolves swim if they must, but queens drown, Robb rasped, eyes flicking to Marjorie. She met his gaze, jaw clenched. If I drown, roses still bloom, but choose blade or water before every bolt on both banks skewer us. Robb scanned. Chains thick, links bigger than a man's head, rising through pulley housings. Axes on chains, he shouted. Sever them. Northern axes rang. Iron groaned, sparks showered. Second chain sheared halfway. Shattered link clanged into river. Bridge sagged, planks slamming back toward base tower. Momentum tipped, riders lurched forward. Fry crossbows volleyed, two Tyrell knights pitched shouting into water. Bridge crashed down, half splintered yet intact. Horn blast from Greatjon signaled charge anew. They thundered across, ramming through meager outer palisade where surprised Fry archers scrambled. Once free into open mead north of the Twins, Robb called halt, rallying survivors beneath tattered wolf banners. Snow mixed with rain, sheen of ice on mail. Caitlin staunched wounds, eyes blazing grief Edmure nowhere, likely consummating while carnage raged. Garland rode up, face streaked soot. Near 300 of my knights survive a half-wounded. 80 of ours, Greatjon added grimly. We'll lose more by dawn if no surgeon. Tallheart pointed southward. 3 miles to Oldstone's ruins. Defensible. If we make bivouac there, we may hold till rest of host arrives if they still live. Robb glanced to Marjorie. Blood spattered her cheek, but gaze clear. They were alive. And in that hard kernel grew purpose hotter than hellfire. Oldstones, he said. Then Ravens to Riverrun, King's Landing, White Harbor. The crossing bleeds wolf. We answer in kind. Dawn crawled pale over frost-shrouded old stones. They buried gray wind at first light beneath a cairn of moss-slick rocks. Robb knelt long, palm upon stones cooling with night's last chill. When he rose, eyes raw yet steady, he turned to the circle of captains Greatjon, Garland, Tallheart, Lady Meage Mormont, arrived in desperate night ride, Sershad of the Queen's Guard missing 2 fingers, archers nursing cracked bows. We will not scatter, Robb began, voice low but unshakable. Walder Fry believes us maimed. He forgets winter wolves heal swift and hungrier. He unbuckled wolf clasp from torn cloak, pinned it to black banner cloth soaked with gray wind's blood. From this day we ride beneath the morning wolf. Let every river lord know. Phrase broke guest right beneath our bread and salt. Let the old gods walk the riverlands once more. Marjorie stepped forward, surprising gathered men by drawing dagger from boot. She sliced open her palm, bright blood welling. Robb looked at her, astonished. Roses bleed with wolves, she declared, pressing her cut against the banner, streaking crimson over gray. Guest right shields all. Break it and summer itself sharpens thorns. A hush reverent spread round. Even great John bowed head, respect shading his ferocity. Robb continued, we march west to Seaguard, rally Malisters, then sweep the Fry lands. No holdfast may call innocence if it harbors Fry garrison. But holdfasts that yield shall be spared pillage, we war on oathbreakers, not small folk. Garland rides south to Highgarden to summon Tyrell strength, Meage Mormont goes north to raise bare banners, Manderley sail from White Harbor with grain and spears. Before the next harvest moon, the crossing will kneel, and Walder Fry will face King's justice beneath the cairn of the Morning Wolf. He paused, letting morning wind carry vow across moss-strewn ruins. Steel rasped as dozens of blades lifted, wolf heads, roses, tridents, green-cloaked spears, all sworn beneath frosty light. Marjorie spoke then, voice carrying silver through. We battle for tomorrow, a realm where no man slaughters guests, where harvest ships sail unburnt, where winter may come but hope roots deep. If I must nurse the wounded myself, I shall. If I must barter reach coin to buy Riverland's seed, I shall. But if any soul doubts the justice of our cause, look to these stones, old stones where the dead kings of first men lie. Their ghosts watch and they judge. In that moment, Robb saw her not as queen of courtly grace but as storm petrel over black waves, fragile yet fearless. He realized then that hope, like winter roses, thrived best in the cracks of ruin. He lifted sword skyward, blade catching sunrise. A king's word is iron. We forge it now. Ride, gather, return. When next we meet, we cross rivers red and cleanse them clean. Horns blew. The host dispersed into columns, Tyrell outriders south, Mormont lancers north, Malister scouts west. In the hush that followed, Robb and Marjorie stood atop Old Stone's weathered sepulchre, hand in hand, gazing toward the silver thread of the trident. Snow began again, gentle, swirling about their cloaks. Marjorie turned to him, brushed fingertip across cheek still stained with soot. Together, she whispered, the vow of Orchard Night. Together, he answered, and below them the ravens lifted in dark flock, wheels turning upon the cold bright wind of vengeance, carrying the morning wolf's warning across a realm once more at war, and this time, war bore the scent of rose and blood and iron winter intertwined. Rain carved silver runnels down the pitted stones of Old Stone's crumbling keep, drumming a low dirge through the empty casements while the wounded dozed in fitful half-sleep. With each new gust the banners lashed overhead, the morning wolf stitched by Caitlyn's hand, the rose bordered in crimson, snapping like thunderclaps that could not be silenced. 5 days had passed since the massacre at the crossing, days measured in the beat of hooves and the iron rasp of whetstones on blades, but time seemed to warp here, lengthening beneath the weight of grief and the fever-bright glare of vengeance. Robb paced the narrow rampart that overlooked what had once been a godswood. Only a black stump remained of the heart tree, the rest hacked down centuries ago when Undul axes first rang across these hills. He traced the old grooves in the stump's weather-split bark, fingertips brushing rainwater pooled like tears. Below, the camp spread across the hillside in hasty terraces. Canvas dark with wet, cook fires guttering in the gusts, healers moving from tent to tent beneath hooded cloaks. Nearly a third of those who had escaped the twins bore wounds, some would never fight again. And every night the death bell tolled for one or two who succumbed despite leech raft and willow bark. Yet each dawn more riders arrived, Karstark outriders wild-eyed with rage, their maces still crusted from crofter skirmishes, a column of reed greenseers in leather cloaks sewn with river reeds, silent save for croak of toads dangling from belts. Even a half-frozen patrol of Night's Watch rangers who had carried Robb's dragonglass north, then ridden south again when the brothers on the wall pledged 40 spare hands to the King's War. They trickled in, sloughing mud and fatigue, drawn to the morning wolf like crows to Stormfire. That morning a fresh arrival crested the road. Ser Brynden met the rider at the outer ditch, conferred briefly, then hurried up the tower stairs 2 at a time. He found Robb in the roofless chamber that served as council hall, maps weighted beneath spear points. Raven from King's Landing, the Blackfish said, holding out the tube. His gray hair clung damp to his temples. Flown to Riverrun and relayed here by a fast hawk. Seal of the Rose. Robb cracked the wax, half-wilted by rain, and scanned the lines, penned in Marjorie's careful hand. Scouts report Tywin withdraws from Harrenhal by nightfall, marching west with the greater host. He moves to consolidate against Greyjoy raids at Fair Isle and to secure grain from Golden Tooth. King's Landing reels from rumors of sorcery, a black kraken sighted beneath the bay, wildfire caches missing, Queen Regent vanished. My grandmother tethers the court with pointed smiles. The Iron Bank's gold is ours, but only if we break the phrase before first snow. Jon Snow writes that the Night's Watch has lost the Shadow Tower, the dead walked within the gate. Justice is more urgent than ever. Ride swift, my wolf. A breath hissed between Robb's teeth. Tywin's march was both curse and blessing, relief for the capital, danger for the western march, but it also meant the old lion feared pressure on two fronts. Orders, the Blackfish asked. Send crows to Mallister and Piper, Robb replied. They harry Lannister regard, slow every wagon. We ride for Seaguard at first thaw. The phrase will expect us to strike north along the Green Fork, so we will break west instead, circle to the Trident's mouth and return upriver with Mallister longships. We seize the crossing from water and land at once. The Blackfish's weather-lined face cracked a smile sharp as arrow flint. A bite from two jaws. While teeth close on Fry throat, we must still watch Bolton, Robb added. Dispatch Reed Greenseers by secret paths to Moat Cailin. If Roose marches south, he'll find every trail flooded or lit with pitch. Done, the Blackfish said. He turned, but Robb caught his sleeve. Uncle Edmure lives. We glimpsed him on the dais before the quarrels flew. We must believe he lives still. Freys will keep a hostage if they fear they might yet parley. Bryndon's eyes softened. I will believe it until proof says otherwise. By the 8th day the rain eased to mist, mist silvered the fields, cloaking columns assembling beyond Oldstone's fallen gatehouse. Robb stood beside Lady Meage Mormont and Great John Umber while Garland Tyrell buckled gilded vambraces over his green enameled plate. The knight's face was pale, not from fear but from grief. Of the 3 Tyrell brothers who had ridden north, only he remained. Ser Loras lay in a sickbed at King's Landing, arrow lodged near spine, while Ser Willis, ever the heir with twisted leg, fortified Highgarden in their absence. 600 mounted Reach Knights, Garland reported. 800 foot, half pike, half bill. Northmen muster 3,000 fit for the line, Great John added. More come on sled and shaggy pony by the hour. Lady Meage thumped chest. Bear Island gives 80 swords. Enough. More than enough, Robb agreed. The rumble of drums carried across the mists, a heartbeat poured into wood. Standard-bearers lifted poles, the flayed man and twin towers painted upside down in mockery, gray winds snarling head amidst a wreath of blood-red petals, a single black kraken impaled upon a northern spear. Cheers rippled outward. Catelyn emerged from the infirmary, sleeves rolled to elbows, apron spattered crimson, hers or another's, one could not tell. She crossed to her son, placed calloused hand upon his cheek. I have ridden to Riverrun, she said. Ser Desmond's garrison will send barges laden with grain and straw bale for siege. Mayhap we will need ladders. The twins' walls are high. Robb covered her hand with his. I shall not let any son of the Red Fork spill blood before his own hearth if I can spare it. You spare no one if you falter, she cautioned, meeting his gaze. Remember that mercy forgives many evils, but only victory forgives mercy. They marched at dawn, the army uncoiling from old stones like copperhead through long grass. Rains had swollen the Blue Fork, ferries listed under the weight of pikes and wagons, ropes groaning. Reed skinboats ghosted ahead, mapping currents, giddy. Lash rafts loaded with barrels. On the far shore Mallister outriders waited, mailed fists raised in salute, silver eagle banners sodden but proud. At Seaguard the harbor was a forest of masts, 20 longships of Mallister build, sleek and gray, 10 Northmen nars with prows carved of snarling bears, half a dozen Tyrell caravels commandeered from smugglers along the coast. Beneath their decks, pitch cauldrons and catapult arms, piles of river stones hoisted aboard by sweating crews. Lord Patrick Mallister met Robb upon the seawall, gulls circling overhead. The Old Lion's outriders circle Maiden Pool, Patrick reported. But his baggage train hugs the coastal road west of Harrenhal. 3 days past, we lured a vanguard of Craycall men into Fenfield's bogs, cost them 60 horses. Well struck, Robb said, clapping the man's shoulder. You'll strike again when we sail. That night they supped in Seaguard's hall. Sparrow simple fare of salt cod and barley bread for luxuries had been sent with Marjorie's last envoy to the wall. Robb studied charts spread across trestles, the meander of the Trident, its backwaters, the tidal flats around the twins. Mariners spoke of hidden sandbars, reed ferrymen marked reed-choked inlets with slivers of green glass. The plan took shape as candles guttered low, attack at dusk on the ebb tide. Mallister ships would ground upon western bank beneath the old timber tower, disgorge Tyrell and reach infantry to batter the west gate while Northmen on Nars threaded smaller channels to land below the east tower. Siege engines on barges would float in behind, their counterweights already loaded. Meanwhile, a third column would ride up the western levee disguised as Bolton outriders bearing Geor-slashed banners to sow confusion inside the courtyard. One spark and the phrase will turn blades on each other, Great John crowed, eyes shining. Bastards breed suspicion faster than rabbits. Robb allowed himself a thin smile. Bastards and phrase both. The tide that carried them upriver reeked of rotting reeds and silt, but the breeze favored north and the sails billowed black against moonless sky. Robb stood in the prow of the Mal-Lister war-galley Evening's Vow. Gray winds pelt draped over his shoulders, though the wolf itself lay buried leagues behind. Beside him Garland Tyrell murmured a half-prayer to the mother, palm resting on the carver's hilt. The riverbanks slipped past as dark walls, only the splash of frog and occasional hoot of owl breaking the hush. As the faint outline of the twins' east tower loomed ahead, a jagged tooth upon star-soaked sky, Robb signaled. Oarbanks ceased. Sails were reefed. Ships glided silent within the river's slow-born breath. Harp strings twanged from the deck of faithful Rose. A solitary song, poignant, drifted across the water. An old reach ballad of lovers parted by war's 3 kings ago. Fry sentries atop the battlements pricked ears, some leaned out, puzzled. The song swelled, 2 voices now, then pipes. A curious hush answered, as if the towers themselves exhaled. Then a horn roared behind the walls, deep, braying, panicked. Torches flared upon parapets. Bolton riders at the north gate, a voice shouted over the dark, distorted by wind. More horns. Drawbridge chains rattled in confusion. Robb smiled grimly. Lady Meade's daughters in stolen flayed-man cloaks had played their part. Mal-Lister galley keels ground into mud, ramps dropped with dull thuds. Tyrell men-at-arms poured down them, shields raised, spiked towers of boarding ladders hefted. On the east bank the Nars drifted into weed tangles, tall cloaked forms waded knee-deep, axes muffled in sheaths of wool. Arrows flickered from tower slits, but the dark and the surprise blunted their sting. A Mal-Lister marine jammed a grapnel, rope taut. Garland Tyrell was the first to scramble upward, plate clinking softly. Robb followed, heart hammering. For handspans up, then 8 boots skidding on damp stone. A fry guard leaned out to cut the rope. Garland's dirk flashed, opened the man's throat in a quiet red sigh. They gained the crenel, rolled over, blades spinning. Robb parried a spear thrust, counterslashed, severing windpipe. Men swarmed behind, over the wall like gleaming ants. Below, the drawbridge began to lower. Fry signalmen, fooled by Meade's riders, sought to admit allies. Instead, they admitted Tyrell's storm. With thudded home, hinges screamed. Footmen charged across, shields up against arrow rain now thickening. But confusion reigned inside the courtyard. Bolton cloaks turned on Fry cloaks, Northmen axes on both, torchlight flaring wilder each heartbeat. Robb vaulted down stone stairs 2 at a time, emerging onto the mud-slick yard as if into a dream remembered in blood. Crossbow strings thrummed. He dove beside a wagon, rolled under the shaft of a hayfork and rose to drive sword through a Fry squire's visor. Grachan's roar erupted near the granary. Lord Patrick Mal-Lister hacked at the south door of the timber tower with an axe of weirwood, sparks flying. White flag shot skyward, an old man in nightshirt stood on gallery, face waxen with terror. Robb recognized Ryman Fry, Walder's heir 3 times removed. "Parley," the man screamed. "Parley." Robb wrenched helm free and strode forward, mud-sucking at greaves. Ladders propped to gallery rung. He climbed, sword dangling loose. When he stepped onto boards slick with frost, Ryman scrambled back, tripping over a coil of rope. "As you love your skin," Ryman babbled, "I yield the east tower, the drawbridge, For breach of guest right the lord of the crossing is forfeit," Robb said, voice loud for all to hear. "Summon him." I cannot." Ryman's eyes darted. "He hides in the great hall, west tower." He thought the flayed man riders were true. Robb sheathed steel with a rasp that sounded like finality. "Then you shall stand proxy." He seized the rope coil, wound it round Ryman's wrists, dragged him to the parapet. Below, fighting ebbed. Men looked up, eyes glinting firelight. Caitlin stood near the well house, hair blown loose, cloak spattered. She met her son's gaze and nodded once. Robb looped the rope over a battlement horn, cinched a noose. Ryman whimpered, "You murdered my bannermen beneath salt and bread." Robb said so all might hear, You ordered bolts loosed on healers, songstresses, on kin sworn to your protection. By laws older than iron, older than kings, you are condemned. He shoved the man. The rope snapped taut, creaked. Ryman Fry kicked air, face purpling. Silence descended but for the pop of pine torches. Robb's voice carried over the hush. Let any who would stay this justice declare cause or suffer like fate. No voice rose, only wind. Dawn found the west tower ringed by northern pikes inside. The great hall stank of spilled wine and bowels. Walder Fry crouched upon his high-backed seat, cane clutched in gnarled hand, thin lips trembling. Behind him cowered an array of petty sons and grandsons, some bloodied. Near the dais Edmure Tully knelt, wrists bound but alive. The instant he saw Caitlin, relief flooded his bruised features. Robb strode the length of the hall, helm removed, hair sweat dark, blood still flecked cheek. He halted before the dais. My lord, Walder wheezed, forcing a smile. I confess misjudgment, great misjudgment. But let us speak of ransom, of reparations. Your house is attainted, Robb said. All titles, lands, and incomes forfeit to the crown. Your family named kinslayer, guestbreaker, to the last generation. Walder's mouth opened but no words came. Yet I would spare innocence, Robb went on. Any child under 10 who bears not arms may depart south under the care of Septa Maria to Old Town. They shall adopt the name Rivers and forget this place. A cough rattled Walder's chest. And me, your grace? Robb's gaze never wavered. You will answer to the gods, and to those whose blood soaks your chamber floors. At a signal 2 Karstark men dragged him from the dais. The cane clattered. Robb turned to his mother. See that Edmure is freed, fed, and tended. To Great John, gather the captains in the yard by midday. Edmure staggered upright, embracing Caitlin. Tears cut clean tracks down her grime-lined cheeks. Edmure brushed them away, voice cracking. Your son is twice the king I'll ever be. Yet we need lords more than kings, she whispered, and pressed her brow to his. That afternoon, beneath gray winter sky, Robb addressed the assembled host. Northmen in patched mail, Reach knights in grass green, river lords with trout sigils ashine. The river behind them flowed a brighter red where bodies had bled the night before, yet the air thrummed with a fierce, raw hope. Justice has begun, Robb declared. Not finished. Roose Bolton rides south with winter wolves at his back. Tywin Lannister scourges the west. The Ironborn carve coast and the others gnaw the edge of the world. We cannot fight every war alone, but we will answer each blow with bond of rose and wolf stronger than iron. He lifted a parchment. Here is the decree. House Mallister appointed castellans of the crossing until a new lord be chosen by the banners of the trident. Edmure Tully to hold Riverlands under the crown, sworn to defend the neck and the trident's mouth. Lady Meage Mormont to ride north with all speed, securing Moat Cailin against Bolton treachery. Garland Tyrell to return south, oversee the muster of the Reach, and sail against the Kraken. A murmured assent rose. Robb unrolled second parchment. This one sealed in green wax, signed by Marjorie and Olenna. The Queen proclaims corn levy exempt for northern lords until spring harvest and pardons all small folk who took up spear under Fry compulsion. The realm shelters its children. Cheers broke, ragged but growing. Robb sheathed parchment. He thought of Marjorie's hand guiding his across ink, smelled again the lemon oils she dabbed on wax to calm nerves. He raised voice. Tonight we bury our dead with rite and song. On the morrow we ride north for some, south for others, but all ride as one realm, one purpose, to hold darkness at bay. He unsheathed sword, lifted it high. Winter has come. We meet it together. Steel clanged against steel, a thunder of ascent. The morning wolf banner braid in wind, crimson petals bright upon gray hide. That same twilight, in King's Landing, Marjorie knelt in the godwood of the Red Keep, newly replanted with saplings from the Blackwater rushes. And pressed palm to swelling belly barely begun to show. Septa Noel lit lanterns shaped like lilies, their petals glowing soft. Garland's raven had yet to return. She waited on stone bench, listening to crickets whisper in the ivy. Footsteps approached. Olenna hobbled, cane tapping gravel. Child, she said, settling beside Marjorie with sigh. You look like hope carved in marble, but marble cracks. Marjorie laid hand over her grandmother's. Robb lives. Freys fall. The wolf comes home. Wolves bite. Roses bleed. Olenna murmured, though her lips curved faintly. I suppose we shall see whose thorns hold once snow buries us all. A soft rustle overhead. A raven descended, light as thought, alighting on the bench's arm. A tube at its leg bore wax of Mallister blue. Marjorie broke seal, scanned message by lantern glow. Lips parted. Tears blurred letters. He took the twins, she whispered. Edmure is freed. Walder sentenced. Robb rides north to break Bolton. She looked skyward, stars flickering. The realm is not lost. Olenna patted her hand. Not yet. But finish your tea, dear. We have a small war with coin and quills tomorrow, and that war kills faster than swords if you misstep. Marjorie smiled through wet lashes. Then we will step carefully. Far to the north, in the ragged shadow of the wall, Jon Snow walked the battlements of Castle Black, cloak snapping in polar wind. He paused to study the horizon where the forest had once been thick, now skeletal trunks jutted from a blanket of white. Pink dawn painted ice crystals on his beard. A horn call sounded, a single long note, rider approaching. Within the hour the gate swung wide for Mage Mormont, armor scratched, face set like stone. With her came 24 bare island spears and a crate of obsidian blades bound in sealskin. Jon met her in the yard. The king sends steel and stone, she said, hefting a satchel. And word that Bolton blood will spill before first thaw. Jon nodded. We hold the wall. He guards the south. She eyed the swirling snow beyond the gate. Let us pray it is enough. Robb's army rode north along the King's Road, banners snapping against iron sky. Snowflakes whipped past helms, stung cheeks, clung to lashes until the world blurred white. But the morning wolf led, and behind it strode a kingdom hard won. Riverlord tridents, reach roses, bear claws, reeds in green. And somewhere ahead beyond the blizzard and the miles, the red fires of Dreadfort, where Roose Bolton plodded beneath flayed banners, awaited reckoning. As hooves drummed frozen ground, Robb touched the hidden charm beneath cloak. Stone rune his father once carried. He pictured Winterfell's walls, warm hearths, the faces of brothers now scattered like seeds upon the wind. He pictured Marjorie's smile, the promise curling beneath her heart. Snow swallowed the road. The north beckoned, and the king rode on, sword and hope alike forged bright against gathering night. The march north began beneath a pallid sky, the hue of hammered pewter, snow spiraling in fine skeins that slipped between visor slits and melted into chins until every soldier wore a sheen like frost-forged mail. The King's Road, once a rib of bustling trade, now lay mostly abandoned, wagon ruts clogged with ice, mileposts half-buried, the occasional farmhouse shuttered tight against wolves both four- and two-legged. Still, the host advanced, 3,000 Northmen limping but unbowed, 1,000 Riverlanders with pikes darkened by the crossing's blood, and 600 Reach Knights whose green enamel dulled to gray beneath relentless flurries. At their head rode Robb Stark, cloak whipped out behind like a banner in its own right, the morning wolf standard affixed to his lance. More than once passers-by mistook the wind-tossed pelt for gray wind risen again, but the eyes that glanced from within helm were wholly human if shadowed by grief too old for a man not yet 20. Catelyn Stark kept close, sometimes on horseback, sometimes walking with the slowest carts to offer a word, a splint, a strip of willow bark. She wore no jewels, only a plain boiled leather gorget and gloves cut from Frydoskin, a grim, deliberate reminder. Edmure rode beside her, arm in sling, the arrow wound beneath still mending. At night he fretted over the humiliation of his mock wedding gilded with slaughter, but his sister would only lay a finger upon his lips and say, "Live, Edmure." That is vengeance enough. He tried to believe her. Garland Tyrell led the vanguard scouts, his polished helm now mottled with rust where unseen acid in the trident's marshy air had eaten the gilding. No harpists followed him along these roads. His music had become the soft cough of arrows and the throat-clearing rasp of drawn swords. He wore a bruise across one cheekbone, gift of a Fry mace haft, and when asked if it pained him he answered that roses bloomed finest when pruned. The reeds of the neck whispered of treachery as the host drew near. Scouts returned speaking of Bolton outriders slipping between stands of alder and ash, always just beyond bowshot, but unmistakable in their pale banners. One night a severed wolf's head appeared upon a crude pike beside the ford at Barrafield. Beneath it a strip of flayed human skin fluttered like a white flag. Robb only had it burned, silent, and pressed on. On the 10th day, storm clouds clotted overhead and burst, dumping snow heavy enough to bow tree limbs and muffle hoofbeats. They made camp in a hollow sheltered by an ancient barrow mound, rumored tomb of some forgotten first king, and ringed the perimeter with wagons. Fires cracked, spat sparks skyward in futile imitation of stars. Robb walked the watch line with Great John, boots crunching ice crystals, eyes searching a darkness alive with the hush of falling flakes. When they reached the mound's arched stone mouth, Great John spat and muttered that ghosts inside would sleep sound, knowing living men kept worse company. Inside the command tent, maps lay spread, corners weighted by daggers. Reed Greenseers stood at the table's edge like carved idols, faces unreadable beneath hoods stitched of cattail leaves. One, little Mira, though grown sharper in bearing since leaving Greywater, traced a gloved finger along the swamplands south of the Twins. "Bolton has raised dikes here," she said, voice low as wind across rushes. "He means to flood the causeway if we press straight for the Dreadfort. But the water obeys the full moon more than any man. 3 nights hence the tide will slack. That is your window." Robb studied the path. "A narrow track, but solid enough for wolf feet if they follow Reed guide," she answered, meeting his gaze with the unwavering steadiness of one who has seen more dead than living these past moons. "We will lead. Your horses must be unshod," the iron sings to water spirits. "Then so be it," Robb said, and turned to Garland. "Select 200 riders most skilled at barefoot cavalla. The rest march on White Harbor's road to faint support of Lord Manderley. Let Bolton believe we've turned east." Garland inclined his head. "I will choose men who can fight in silence." That night Robb took ink and quill, wrote long into the small hours by sputtering candle. One letter to Marjorie, "My love, when last snow falls let the lemon trees bud for our child," another to Maester Eamon at the wall, promising more obsidian if the watch yet stood, and a third to Ser Davos Sarsfield in Sunspier, sealing Prince Tristane's betrothal to Lady Bethamal Lister if Dorne would march north come spring. Catelyn watched without speaking, hands clasped around a mug grown cold. Only when Robb sealed the final parchment did she say, "You write as if these were your last words." "All words may be last in wartime," he answered and kissed her brow. 2 hours before dawn the horn blown by watchmen froze half-formed on cold air. Shapes loomed at the edge of firelight, gaunt riders bearing the flayed man. They did not charge, instead they called across the darkness, voices high, near lilting. "The king in the north may keep his crown," they jeered, "but the bastard of Bolton keeps his scent." Arrows knocked, loosed, thudded into shields, a dozen Bolton riders wheeled away laughing. In their wake they left another wolf head, this one fresh enough to steam in the snow. The growl that rose among Robb's men was a rumble felt underfoot. Reed guides led the main column southwest as planned, but on the 3rd day Robb split from it with his hand-picked spearhead, 200 silent riders, 40 Reed skirmishers on foot, and the Blackfish commanding rear guard. They moved at dusk, hooves wrapped in boiled leather, through waterlogged copses where willow-wisps bobbed like sad lanterns. The full moon climbed, but cloud veils draped her light. Still the tide turned sluggish, and the track Mira had promised revealed itself, drier ground glinting faintly beneath half-flooded sedge. For 2 nights they pressed through marsh stink. Bog gas hissed at torch sparks. Once a horse sank to girth in mud and had to be put down lest its screams betray them. But on the 3rd dawn a cold wind carried wolfbark, Dreadfort's outer pens, ferocious war dogs scenting strangers. Its silhouette. He emerged, a squat bastion of pink granite atop a rocky rise, flayed man banners snapping under a sky just pale enough to guess at dawn. Robb studied walls streaked with rime. "Bolton robs himself of watchmen," the Blackfish murmured. "The bastard takes most south, leaving father inside." "And father leaves lights burning to feign strength," Robb replied. "We strike before they guess our numbers." Reed slithered ahead, cutting throats of pickets stationed too far apart. Northmen archers followed, stringing bows with sinew kept dry beneath tunics. Garland and his riders circled, seeking the postern gate Mira claimed Bolton rarely locked. He trusted the moat's icy teeth. When they found it rusted but barred, a young reach knight named Ser Joss Crane wedged a cloaked shield beneath hinges and applied slow, patient leverage until would surrendered with a sigh. They flooded in like shadow. Dogs barked, but 1 arrow apiece silenced them. A stable boy screamed once before Catelyn's dagger made hush. Sentries atop the inner curtain wall dozed by braziers, warming hands. Blackfish arrows found chests, toppled bodies into snow. The first alarm horn did not sound. It only gurgled when a reed girl sliced its blower's throat. Robb led the advance across the yard. Snow lay deep, churned by recent departures. At the keep door stood Steelshanks Walton, Roos's loyal captain, mail half-donned, eyes wide. He started to shout, but Robb's sword hilt struck temple. The man crumpled like wet linen. Inside, torchlight flickered upon red stucco walls painted with flayed figures. Bolton heraldry in gruesome murals. The air smelled of vinegar and iron. They found Roose Bolton in the great hall, seated before a modest breakfast tray, pale eyes reflecting the torch glow like candlewick in milk. He did not flinch even as Northmen spilled into the hall. Instead, he set down a spoon with mechanical grace, dabbed lips with cloth. "So," he said, voice silk-thin, the young wolf bares teeth at last. Robb's reply was low fury. "You conspired with Fry, butchered my men while feigning fealty. For this treason." "Treason?" Roose rose, slow. "Which crime is greater, my king? That I sought peace with a lion, or that you dragged the North into a southern morass chasing a crown of bones? The North will bleed yet. I bleed it clean." Garland stepped forward, point of carver angle to throat. "You will bleed yourself if you finish that thought." Roose's gaze flicked to the Green Knight. "Sir Garland, is it? You stand tall for a man on the wrong stump." "Enough," Robb snapped. "I offer you one mercy, a cell and the wall, if you sign confession and name every conspirator north of Moat Cailin. Refuse, and the Dreadfort's dungeons will taste their own flaying steel." Roose's mouth curved in something approaching sorrow. "The wall is doomed. I have ravens. The dead walk. You think a castle of ice will stop them?" "I think not." He exhaled. "But I will sign, your grace. The world is long, perhaps I'll see its end from atop a frozen wall of legend." He extended wrists for binding. It was too easy. The Blackfish's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing as chains clanked shut. Robb ordered men to escort Bolton to the kennels, there to await transport south. Then began the grim work of securing the castle, disarming garrison, inventorying stores, releasing thralls from oubliettes. Many prisoners bore fresh wounds, girls taken for sport, small folk skinned in patches to test pain. One, a boy no more than 15, whispered that Ramsay Snow had ridden south with 200 horse to rendezvous with Tywin at the Weeping Water, promising the Old Lion the north for his flank. "Old Lion will find he bargains with wraiths," Robb muttered, but his thoughts churned. Ramsay loose, Tywin's grand designs, the walls failing. At dusk they lit beacon fires on Dreadfort's tower, a warning to any Bolton loyalists still roving the countryside. Snow gusted harder, swirling ash among sparks. In the yard, Edmure supervised building of gallows, a simple affair, stout beam for ropes. At dawn, Walder Bolton cousins would hang for crimes recorded in ledgers seized from Roose's solar, each page an inventory of flesh. But Roose himself remained a problem. Some among the host argued for immediate execution, others, Caitlin foremost, insisted lawful trial at Winterfell once snow thawed. Late that night Robb walked the ramparts alone. Below, stables glowed ember-red, men singing a riverland's dirge over cauldrons of mulled cider. He pressed hand to stone chill and stared north where the night glimmered pale with aurora. Somewhere beyond those lights his half-brother John battled cold nightmares made flesh. Robb wondered if victory over men meant anything when winter itself marched. Footsteps behind, Caitlin. She drew cloak tight, joined him. For long moments they watched icy ribbons dance. "When you were small," she said, breath misting, "you caught fireflies in Winterfell's godwood. You trapped them in a jar and swear the little lanterns could light the wall." She smiled, sad. "I think of that tonight." He said nothing. Roose signed, she continued. "Named Fry, named Ramsay, named Lord Serwyn, and a dozen lesser who bent knee to promise of titles. It seals his guilt and his fate." "It seals more than that," Robb murmured. "It leaves a hole. The North needs wardens, mother. Good ones." He turned to her, voice rough. "I would name the Blackfish Lord of Riverrun, you Lady Protector of the Trident until Edmure's heir comes of age, if Edmure will yield. And in the Dreadfort I will seat a house that remembers loyalty." He hesitated. "Lady Mormont suggests houses Risswell and Tall Heart share the holdfast balance of Crannock and coast." Caitlin's brows lifted. "Divided rule invites quarrel." "So does concentrated power," he countered. "We will build webs, not ladders. No man again shall climb high enough to flay the realm." She touched his cheek. "You speak wiser than your years. But webs catch the innocent and the guilty alike. Snowflakes gathered on their eyelashes. Then we learn when to cut strands," he answered. "Come morning we ride for Winterfell." Ramsay Snow rode hard for the coast, black curls matted with sleet, pale eyes alive with feral delight. His escort of Bolton loyalists daubed blood on their cheeks to keep the winds bite. They carried cages of ravens trained to peck out eyes. In his saddlebags, Ramsay kept the skin of one Stark outrider, cured to supple leather, intending to present it to Tywin Lannister as proof of his devotions. But as they approached the Weeping Water estuary, they found the sky crowded by sails, white, green, and blue. House Manderley's fleet had anchored here earlier than rumor claimed, joined by stiff-masted ships from Gulltown flying Arryn Falcon. Shoreline bristled with archers. Ramsay's men balked. He spurred forward, shrieking the crows did not fear gulls. Crossbow bolts whistled in reply, lancing through two riders. The skinsmith wheeled, curses trailing. He fled northeast, toward Last River's wild banks, but the snow thickened, tracking his flight like spilled milk. By dusk the sounds of pursuit echoed bear horns, reed flutes. Ramsay slipped into forest, slid his horse's belly to mask scent, crawled beneath carcass. When dawn stole through branches he was alone, but Prince ringed the clearing, paw marks of dire wolf grown monstrous, each as wide as dinner plate. That afternoon a company of Bear Island spears found the flayed man's riders dead in drifts, eyes plucked. No sign of Ramsay but for a blood-stiff cloak hanging from a branch, white fur mottled pink. They burned it without a word. Winterfell rose from surrounding snowfields like a memory unearthed, towers charred yet standing, inner walls gouged by siege but repaired with fresh quarried blocks. Smoke curled from Great Hall chimney. Manderley masons had refitted the hearth. As Robb's column crested the ridge south of the village, he felt his heart stutter. Sun struggled through overcast, casting faint halo around broken battlements. Memories flooded. Arya racing along parapets, Rickon's laugh echoing through the first courtyard, Bran perched on ledge dreaming of sky. All ghosts now scattered. The gates opened. Ser Roderick Castle, maimed arm-bound in sling, led a welcoming party of winter townfolk, small in number but big in voice, cheering hoarsely. Behind them wagons bore barrels of preserved root vegetables, smoked trout, and a cask of spiced mead brewed in Jonquil's orchard. Robb dismounted, kissed Roderick's brow, and wept unashamed into the old knight's shoulder. Catelyn stood aside, tears shining. They entered through the gatehouse. Warm humidity breathed up from the newly restored hot springs coursing beneath stone. Steam fogged corridors, skipping along cracks. In the godswood the heart tree still stood, white bark stained deeper from soot of sacking, but its red leaves clung, stubborn, whispering as wind parted them. Robb knelt there that evening alone, sword laid across knee. He spoke to no living ear, only to the faces of gods. Fathers, mothers, those lost. When he rose the moon hung full above the branches, and snow had ceased at last. The next morning a council convened in the great hall, though drafts whistled through half-patched roof. Around the stone snow kraken carved in floor knelt lords and captains. Lady Meage, Great John, Tallheart, Roderick. Across the sea of furs stood Davos Sarsfield, returned from Sunspear with parchments sealed by Dornish sun and spear, and at Robb's right hand Catelyn, flanked by Blackfish, the Ravenry's maester. Young Septon Calder, acolyte of the Starry September sent north by Marjorie, read aloud Roose Bolton's signed confession, detailing collusion with Walder Frey, timing of crossbow volleys, even the price of each northern lord's betrayal. 1 golden dragon per pound of friend's flesh delivered. When Calder's voice fell silent, Robb stood. Let it be written, he said, that on this day the house of Bolton falls. Lands and castle granted to houses Ryswell and Tallheart in perpetuity under joint stewardship. The Dreadfort shall be renamed Heartwatch, its crypts cleansed, its flaying racks melted. So speak I, Robb of House Stark, king in the north and protector of the realm in snow, by blessing of old gods and new. A thunder of fists on tables answered. Yet one concern lingered, the bastard. No word since Weeping Water. Scouts combed woods but found only ravaged corpses of ravens, each tongue removed. Robb knew Ramsay yet lived and shivered at thought. That night Winterfell rang with feasting for the first time in seasons, oat bread, boar, onions roasted in goose fat. Harpers played, though notes hung thin in cavernous hall missing half its roof. Robb drank sparingly, mind on Jon's last raven, wall breached at Shadow Tower, wildlings fleeing south pursued by white shadows. Dragonglass scarce. Maester Aemon begged for fire-blood king's men who carried the burning faith. Catelyn caught the storm in her son's eyes. After the third toast she drew him aside into a disused solar where a baby direwolf's pelt still served as rug. She closed the door. You think of the wall, she said, reading him. I think of what comes after walls fall, he answered. The dead threaten every banner. My crown cannot feed them, steel alone. He exhaled. We must call the realm. A great council, perhaps upon Dragonstone, far from both winter's teeth and lion's roar. Lannisters will not come, Catelyn warned. They will if Dorne marches, he countered. If Tyrells hold King's Landing, if Vale sends Falcon Knights. They will come because winter spares no castle. She brushed a curl from his brow. You sound your father's voice. He closed eyes, allowed warmth of touch. I hope to sound his wisdom. Outside, wind whined through broken shingles. Somewhere in the corridor a maid laughed, brittle as ice underfoot. Robb wrapped arms around his mother and held her until her shoulders stopped trembling. South of Winterfell, in the ragged foothills where mountains clawed sky, a lone figure staggered along half-buried road. Ramsay Snow had survived wolves, watchers, and night cold by gutting rabbits and wearing their steaming pelts under cloak, but hunger gnawed his belly raw. Beneath his breastplate ulcers festered where horses' blood had spattered. Every few miles he barked laughter at the storm, promising new flayings of his own design once he found refuge. Refuge came unlooked. Atop a rise he spied torchlight dancing within ruined holdfast, an abandoned Umber outpost from an older war. Smoke trickled from chimney. He crept near, dagger ready, and peered through shutters crack. Inside, half a dozen men huddled around spit-roast hair, armor patched with lion and crane insignias, Lannister scouts lost from Tywin's column. Ramsay's grin split chafed lips. Fate served him prey. When dawn rose blood-pink on snow, the long hall door swung wide. Out stepped Ramsay draped in lion cloak 2 sizes large, hair freshly washed in melted snow, cheeks flushed. Behind lay 6 skinned corpses, their hides he left pinned to rafters like flags. He stole their horses, their dried meat, their maps etched with Tywin's supply lines. Then he rode south again, but not to Tywin, to Hornwood, where rumors said a dark sorcerer from Karth sold glass candles that burned without fire. Ramsay desired such flame to melt more than snow. At King's Landing a hush had fallen rare as snowfall in summer. With Tywin in retreat and Cersei vanished, rumored fleeing east with her youngest, Marjorie presided from the Red Keep like a steward of embers. She convened guild masters, ordered price ceilings on grain, invited itinerant septons to preach unity. Twice assassins struck, one a mute child with dagger laced in widow's blood, the other a beggar sprouting manticore barbs disguised as scabs. Both failed. The Queen of Thorns found and flayed masterminds with barbed wit until confessions flowed. When Raven arrived announcing Bolton's fall, Marjorie stood on maiden vault balcony, belly a gentle rise beneath emerald gown. She read the parchment aloud to the Tyrell guard commander, voice trembling only once when Robb's signature curved at page bottom. Send gold to Winterfell, she said. Let my lord rebuild roof before waters freeze. She pressed hand to stomach. And send lemon cakes. I crave them more than aught. The commander bowed, but his smile too lingered, hope enough to thaw a city grown cynical. At the wall Jon Snow watched first sunrise after new moon crest a horizon of jagged ice. Tormund Giantsbane stood beside him, hair stiff with frost, recounting tale of dead things bursting from ice like wasps from a rotten apple. Below, hundreds of wildlings camped within shadow of Castle Black, uneasy allies now. Meage Mormont drilled them in spear lines, while Night's Watch brothers shared thin barley rations. A horn sounded 2 notes, riders approaching. Jon descended steps in long strides. 8 timbers parted to admit a column flying banners of reed and dire wolf entwined. At their head rode Mira Reed, face windburnt but resolute. Behind her a sledge heavy with obsidian ingots, forged arrowheads, and something stranger, a curved blade forged of pale glass that shimmered blue in dawn light. From the children, she told Jon, unwrapping cloth. And from your brother, King. Ghost fire, they call it. It cuts things that do not live. Jon cradled the blade, awe and dread mingling. Tell Robb the wall stands while our hearts beat. You will have chance to tell him yourself, she answered. He rides by mid-month. Jon's breath misted. Then we stand, come whatever wind. But wind had many voices. Across the narrow sea in the smoking ruins of Valyria, a she-dragon with scales the color of moonlit ash beat wings over collapsed spires. She came alone, riderless, drawn by sense of salt and shadow. Beneath her cracked stone, something stirred, eggs the size of wine casks, shells spiderwebbed with heat wounds. Fire leaked between the fissures, faint as ember under ash. The dragon circled thrice, keened. Clouds of cinder lifted. Beyond horizon, storms brewed. Back in Winterfell, Robb convened final council before departing for the wall. Lords circled Brazier glowing cherry red. He named Galbart Glover Castellan in his absence, commanded Manderley ships to patrol White Knife for any gray sails, and charged Lady Alice Karstark with mustering every able-bodied youth for spear drills. When all oaths were sworn, he slipped from hall by kitchen passage, climbed tower stairs to the solar where Caitlin stitched names into a tapestry of dire wolf-chasing sun. He closed doors softly. "Mother," he began, but words caught. She set needle aside, eyes glimmering. "You leave at dawn." He nodded. "We ride light. Blackfish remains to guard you." "Blackfish guards realm," she corrected gently. She rose, took his hands. "Your father once told me the North remembers not because it is stubborn, but because forgetting is too costly. Do not forget yourself beyond that wall, Robb. We lost too much to ghost stories turned flesh." He swallowed. "I will return, and I will keep hearth warm." She pressed small bundle into his hands. Harpstrings of horsehair wound around a carved wolf head. From Bran's broken lyre. The strings still sing. Robb's throat tightened. He kissed her brow, tucked token inside jerkin. That night before first watch, he wrote one more letter to Marjorie, shorter than the rest. "I march to winter's edge. If the world grows night, look east for dawn. I follow it back to you." He sealed with wax, pressed dire wolf ring, and trusted wind to carry. At dawn the gate swung wide. Robb rode out on a new stallion of stout Carhold stock, mane white as new parchment. Behind him marched 400 chosen, lords, rangers, spearwives sworn to follow north of the wall. Among them Garland Tyrell refusing to part, Ser Roderick despite sling, Mira Reed at forefront. Snowflakes shimmered in pale sun. A horn sounded farewell, Winterfell's people lined parapets, waving scraps of cloth. Caitlin watched until column became smudge on step. She pressed gloved hand to lips, whispered prayer to gods old and new. In the distance wolves howled, the living kind, and wind carried the sound like promise. Farther north, beyond yet unseen battles, a realm of ice waited. And within it, perhaps, the fate of all stories, whether written in roses or in wolves, whether sung by harps or silenced beneath snows that remembered every footstep ever taken. Robb Stark urged his mount into brisk trot. The host followed, banners snapping, wolf, reed, rose. Above them the sky unfurled, vast, gray, indifferent, and ahead it darkened, horizon bruising to indigo where aurora flickered like ghost fire blades. They rode toward it anyway, for to ride away was to surrender breath itself. And so the clatter of hooves echoed across winter's spine, repeating one word older than any tongue, forged in every heartbeat shared by those who refused to yield. Onward. Wind knifed across the shivering sea and came shrieking down the ragambone ridges of the frostfangs, whittling every exposed edge to glass. The North had always been a stern mother, but as Robb Stark and the slim spearhead of his war-forged host pressed beyond Mole's town into the barren sweep called the Gift, he felt as though the land itself drew breath only to freeze their hearts in it. Snow lay hip-deep in drifts, the hoofs of their unshod horses sank soundlessly, leaving tunnels rather than prints. Pine branches bent under crusted white and then cracked with reports like musket fire, scattering flakes in glittering showers. By night the sky rippled in gree. And serpents of aurora, cold flames licking the bowl of the heavens. Even the stalwart great John Umber grumbled that they rode through a dream some dead god had imagined. They saw first sign of Castle Black 2 evenings later, a sullen stain of torch glow pulsing at the base of the wall, scarcely brighter than the stars. The wall itself loomed like the spine of the world, an unimaginable height of crystal blue ice that caught the last color of dusk and broke it into pale rainbows. Beneath its airy crest, black dots moved, sentries pacing the battlements, while further west orange sparks blossomed where builders patched a rent that ran crooked as lightning down 30 spans. Ravens wheeled above the breach, cawing their disapproval to the dying light. Mira Reed guided the column through a series of shallow ravines that hid their approach. Reed skirmishers slipped ahead, reed flutes trilling low to signal clear ground, and soon a watch patrol rode out. 5 rangers in patchwork furs, spears bristling with obsidian barbs. At their heads strode Jon Snow on a rangy gray courser, ghost loping ghost white at his heel. Jon's face was older than Robb remembered, cheeks hollowed by hunger, eyes shadowed by sleepless watchfulness. Yet when the half-brothers clasped arms in greeting, the tall ranger's cracked lips bent in a smile that kindled dark warmth amid the ice. "There are fewer of us each dawn," Jon said as he led them under the shadow of the wall's gatehouse. "But we stand, and that is enough for dread to ponder." The portcullis groaned as it lifted. Inside the yard of Castle Black, the old timber buildings crouched half-buried by snowbanks. Roofs braced under new beams of greenheart shipped from White Harbor. Wildling tents dotted the eastern quadrant. Tanned hides roped over pole frames, cooking pits smoking with the scent of rabbit stew and fermented goat milk. Spearwives glanced up from their pots. wary eyes tracking the newcomers. Children scurried away in small packs, trailing laughter thin as broken glass. Brothers of the watch moved among them carrying water buckets, muttering half in courtesy, half in weary resignation. Mej Mormont stood near the armory steps barking orders at a knot of lumbering giants, gesturing with an axe half towards stacked logs that needed splitting for fires. Farther on, a row of reeds in leather and mud paint knelt about a cauldron of green resin, dipping arrow shafts that sizzled when the resin touched snow. High above, in the patched breach where a slab of ice had once collapsed, two silhouettes hammered thick pegs of dragaglass into newly cut grooves. One shape was too broad of shoulder to be any crow, Tormund Giant's bane by the roar of his laughter, the other slimmer, nimble upon frosted footing, Alice Stark, who had ridden ahead by secret track 5 days prior and was now bedecked in black mail stitched with stars of crushed ice. Robb surrendered his cloak to a waiting steward who carried it off to shake free of rime, then followed Jon to the commander's solar, formerly Jeor Mormont's chambers, now stripped of trophies and made stern with maps inked in charcoal. A brazier hissed in one corner, though the warmth hardly chased breath fog from the air. Jon unpinned his cloak, draped it over the coals so melting crystals crackled. "I had word you quitted Winterfell at first light after the gallows," he said, hand resting on the hilt of Longclaw. "But I feared storms would delay you." "Storms only sharpened our purpose," Robb replied, studying the great hide stretched across the wall. Ink scratched a dozen black X's representing ruined way castles, 5 fresh circles marked new harrying camps where dead gathered. "Tell me all." Jon ran fingertips over the circles. "These bodies of frozen water and snow, they call them lakes, but lakes should be silent. At Hardhome they moved. At Queen's Crown they moved. We burned them there, bodies stacked thrice the height of my horse, yet the next dusk they walked again. Fireworks, aye, so does dragonglass if you find the heart, but there are too many." He exhaled. "We've sealed Eastwatch tight and pulled men from Shadow Tower, but the true blow will land here. The breach is only half mended. Tormund's giants ram another from time to time, hoping to wedge ice free, but it is patchwork." Robb traced one ridge of the hide map with gloved finger. "My host counts fewer than 1,000 fit for climb. Even if we reinforce every yard, they will pour over edges like ants." A voice from shadows. "Ants can be lured to honey or burned by glass." Mira Reed stepped inside, closing door against wind. She held up a small pouch woven from willow twigs. Inside rattled shards the color of moonlight-tinged pale blue, ghost fire glass. Children of the forest gifted a second haul. Enough to tip 10,000 spears. Their archers ride within the snows, waiting to strike when sky screams. Robb studied the pouch, amazed at its weightlessness. "Then our spears will sting." He looked again to map. "But poison only kills if it pierces. We need a hammer." Jon met his eye. "And I think I know where to find one." 2 mornings later they assembled at the foot of the wall's ancient winching cage, a company of 200 chosen, crows, wildlings, Mormont spears, reeds, and Stark outriders intermingled, each clad in wolf fur-trimmed cloaks, obsidian daggers at belt. Flames hardened into their eyes. Snow hissed around them in swirling eddies. Garland Tyrell stood at Robb's flank, Carver slung across back. Grey Jon grumbled about scaling ladders built for cats. Mira Reed moved like thought at the rear, her frog spear shining oily black. Above, giants hauled the cage skyward with bellows like hearth bellows until the door clanged against the top of the wall. They gathered on knife edge of ice. From this height, the world beyond melted into airborne haze. Forests drowned in white, evening star glimmering faint on the shoulder of sky. But northward roiled a curtain of darkness. A marching blizzard shot through with blue sparks. An army of silence, neither dead nor living, only cold made will. Jon pointed west along the top walk, where new ramparts ringed the patched breach. "We station archers here, flint spears along inner step, but the hammer lies 10 leagues beyond Ghostwood, the heart tree of Frostflower Glen. Beneath its roots sleeps Blackwater stone mined by the children. Within that stone, veins of living fire." He paused. "A dragon without wings, they say. Crack it and the flames spill." Robb frowned. "The stories that shaped the first men into allies of the children also whisper of that place. It is cursed. Curses matter less than fire," Jon said. "We need fuel hotter than pitch, brighter than sunrise, to burn the horde." His gaze hardened. "I ride at dusk with a dozen. It is madness, but life beyond the wall has made me worship madness." Robb gripped his brother's shoulder. "Then I ride too, and Garland, And Mira, Great John thumped axe half to ice. And if you leave Umber behind, I'll split that pretty white horse of yours head to tail. They argued, but the matter settled as battles often did, with grudging obedience to courage. John would lead 25 through Ghostwood, each carrying satchels of obsidian and baskets of green resin to throw upon the stone once cracked. Robb and the Blackfish would command defenses along the breach, while Great John and Meege Mormont sealed the gatehouse with barricades of double timber and boiling oil. Dusk bled copper into snow as the strike team departed. They rode light, heavy cloaks rolled behind saddles, each packhorse laden with coil rope, chisels, hammers, and clay jugs of mead laced with nightshade, for wounds better ended swiftly. Ghost loped ahead, white fur mauled by starlight. The forest swallowed them at a pace almost gentle. Tall pine pillars streaked black, their boughs arching like cathedral ribs. Branches creaked overhead, somewhere an owl shrieked. In the hush, each rider's breath sounded a tide inside own skull. Hours passed. The trees thinned. The party emerged onto a flat expanse where drifts shaped dunes. At its center rose the Hartree, a monstrous weirwood unlike any south of the wall, trunk twice the girth of Winterfell's, bark gray as tarnished bone rather than white, sap congealed black at the mouth of its sorrow eyes. But the tree lived, its branches bore crimson leaves, fanned like tongues tasting air. Beneath, protruding from snow like a breaching whaleback, lay boulder after boulder of glassy obsidian rock, veins of red fire pulsing faint within. Mira dismounted first. She removed gloves, placed palm to boulder. Hot, she whispered in wonder. It drinks the cold. Hammers rang. Sparks flew. Ghost paced, ears flat, eyes blazing crimson. The strike team worked in silence save for clang and grunt, chiseling stone slabs that groaned as though reluctant. From cracks seeped thin red glow, liquid light, not molten but viscous like sap. It hissed on snow, carving black channels before freezing into crystalline shards that flickered. They filled clay jars, stoppered them with pitch. Garland paused, wiping frost and sweat. We birth wildfire of the earth, he murmured. Fire, John corrected absent-mindedly, leaning on pick. The children named it Lyre-Nas, blood of first night. One vial can burn an acre of ice. Mira straightened suddenly, nostrils flaring. Horses, she said. Southwest. They doused lanterns. Through gaps in timber they glimpsed movement, a ragged chase line of men on gaunt mounts, banners ragged, Bolton silver-flayed men and one lion scarlet. Ramsay Snow rode at their head, cloak of lion pelt now black with soot. He led Tywin's outriding vanguard, perhaps seeking secret passes. The column reined in at edge of glen, torches high, ice catching the faint red veins pulsing across rock. Ramsay dismounted, laughing, cocking head as though hearing song inside skull. Fire under ice, he mused aloud. Father promised marvels, but not this. He drew blade of pale steel, tapped boulder. We skin the world tonight, boys. John's party crouched among roots. Mira readied frog spear, Garland unsheathed carver, its blade singing north wind. Great John muttered prayer to any god fond of axes. John signed quick orders, hold until torches near, then strike with ghost fire. But Ghost moved first. Snow parted, white direwolf streaked from flank and tore through a Lannister horse's throat. Chaos erupted, men shouted, horses reared, torches arced fiery fans. Ramsay whirled, struck, missed as Ghost danced away crimson-fanged. Robb leapt from hiding, two-handed sword bellowing down on Bolton outrider. Steel clove helm sprang memory. Great John crashed into another, axe-hooking shoulder free of arm. Reed archers unlimbered bows tipped with obsidian, arrows hissing. Torches fell, red pools flared. Ramsay darted through melee like eel in shallows, blade flashing. He lunged at Mira, eyes ecstatic. She parried, sparks ricocheted, his grin widened. Pretty frogling, he sang. Skin sings sweet. John blocked next blow of Ramsay's blade with dragon glass dagger, stone meeting Valyrian, both rang discord. They circled. Ramsay feinted high, drew dirk low, John pivoted, kicked knee. Ramsay staggered, laughing through blood. Meanwhile Tyrell men clasped fire jars, lit wicks, and hurled into mass of Lannisters. Jars shattered, liquid fire leapt bright white, burning colder than ice yet devouring flesh. Screams split forest as flames ate men from boots upward, leaving statues of falling ash. Ramsay saw his host dying and cursed. He flung strange powder from pouch. Black dust catching torchlight, and in the sudden thick smoke he fled, darting toward his mount. But Ghost pounced, jaws clamping calf. Ramsay screeched and kicked free, severing strap of saddlebag to spill skinned faces across snow. He mounted bleeding, galloped into dark with 3 men. They did not pursue, the forest beyond seethed with unnatural moan. Jon called withdrawal. They swaddled jars, loaded pack horses, and quit the glen as first flakes of a new storm whirled sideways. At Castle Black campfires ringed the breach, their flames humming dull orange while brothers stood tiered behind ice merlins. The horde approached before dawn, a moving wall of frost, whites packed shoulder to shoulder, eyes lambent blue. Above them others glided on gaunt pale steeds, armor reflecting star shards. Behind, a sound like wind through dead wheat, a million footfalls on snowpack. The ground trembled. Robb's stomach twisted yet his voice carried. Hold until flame, he shouted along parapets. Knock. Loose. Arrows flew. Obsidian tips bursting blue fire where they struck skull or rib. White stumbled, shattered. Yet more climbed over. Giant Mag the mighty, last of his kin, stood in breach gap, wielding oak trees studded with iron. Each swing crushed 6 dead things, scattering shards of frozen flesh. Beside him Meege Mormont hurled spears faster than any trained man. One eye swollen shut, lips chanting island rhymes. Midst fury a shrilling horn split sky, the ranger signal from Ghostwood. 2 long, 1 short, objective secured. Moments later riders crested the steeps, Jon at point. Leading train of horses dragging sleds hung with jar after jar of glowing red fire. Snow boiled around sled moons where heat escaped lids. Jon waved torch. Robb called, open gate, lower ramps. Builders winched heavy beams into trench across breach. Rangers hefted jars along ski sleds. As first rank of whites surged, they rolled jars down ramps. Pitch-lit wicks. Reed archers shot flaming arrows. When arrowheads pierced wax, earth fire erupted, a ripping roar of white-blue flame that spilled across ice like liquid dawn. Heat slammed Robb's face, forced him 2 steps back. The front 1,000 whites ignited, torsos splitting in showers of ash and crystal. Their shrieks were the hiss of water on iron. Yet the others twisted in saddle, raised slim crystal lances, and from their tips blossomed a bloom of cold, a cloud of shimmering silver that smothered flame, turned liquid fire to brittle glass. The dead advanced again, crunching their burned kin. Garland Tyrell saw and understood. Sink the stone, he cried. With Blackfish he tipped second sled, spilling jars from battlement to the ravine floor. Jon loosed arrow of ghost fire at 1 jar. It burst midair, raining droplets that burned where they fell, eating ice to vapor before cold could swallow. Others hissed as droplets touched armor, patches of plate flared, cracking. 1 pale steed lost forelegs, shattering into shards. Now Robb glimpsed something amid ranks, a tall figure in mail of ice dark as void, eyes holes of starless night. Crown of ice horns adorned brow. The Night King. He raised hand. Whites redoubled, climbing upon each other, bodies forming grotesque steps. Mag the mighty roared, planted foot. But the Night King pointed, Mag's torso froze solid, breath emerging as crystal dust, giant froze mid-cry and toppled, shattering into jagged plates. Robb felt despair claw his ribs. But then Ghost leapt from top walk, bounding across white shoulders, and past him raced smaller figure, Mira, frog spear aflame with ghost fire. She darted up the corpse pyramid, wordless. The Night King turned, laughter like ice cracking lake. He thrust lance, Mira slid under, carving amber gash in horse's chest. Beast erupted in plume of cold, unseating rider for first time in living memory. Night King landed lightly, blade of Nightborn, ice forming in hand. Robb's heart hammered. He scaled ladder, jumped to yard, sprinted toward chaos. Jon saw as well, shadowing. The duel unfolded swift. Night King's sword wove arcs freezing air, Mira's spear flicked sparks of pale fire. Clash produced shrieks that set teeth vibrating. Yet each time ice met ghost fire, sliver of frost cracked away. Still the Night King pressed, speed beyond mortal. Robb skidded at melee's edge, swung great sword two-handed. The blade rang harmless across the Night King's back, steel shattered to glittering fragments. He stumbled, stunned. Night King wheeled, hand lifting. An arrow whistled, Jon's shot, tip of dragon steel old Valyrian forged long centuries. It struck the Night King at base of skull. For heartbeat nothing. Then fracture lines spider-webbed across icy flesh. Crown horns splintered, sockets flared brilliant blue, figure erupted into dust. Silence thundered. Across battlefield dead halted mid-stride, blue flames guttering. They began to collapse like puppets freed of strings. Those yet climbing ramp tumbled like felled saplings. The sound was avalanche in reverse, frost bodies returning to powder. Men stood gasping amid sea of melting ash. Sun-cracked horizon, pale gold spilling down wall's length. Wind carried scent of burnt pine and something new, spring, perhaps. Robb turned to Jon, arms trembling. Words failed, so he clasped him tight. Jon's cloak smelled of smoke and cold, yet warmth traveled between their heartbeats. Great Jon whooped, lifted axe, gave throat to sky. Wildlings pounded spear butts, crows shouted hoarse victory. In that chorus of exhaustion and disbelief, Robb felt weight lift heavier than any crown. He remembered lemon groves far south and Marjorie's voice telling stories to a child not yet born. The 30th dawn after the battle, ravens flew south testifying the wall held. Spring rumors rode with them, budding thistle at the base of watchtower, drip of meltwater from ice stairs. Castle Black smelled of wet earth and roasted venison instead of fear. Jon Snow stood atop King's Tower watching Robb ready his departure. Below, carts packed with unused earthfire jars creaked, Garland's knights saddled lean destriers, Mira Reed's folk sang low songs thanking nameless rivers. Robb Clem stared to join Jon. They looked north, the land still white but clouds thinned, sun's fire warmer on skin. I go south, Robb said. Bolton fled, Tywin regroups. The realm must gather to rebuild. Jon nodded. And I remain. He smiled wry. Someone must keep the ghosts out. Robb clasped his forearm. Right when first fireflies appear, I shall send beasts to answer. Jon laughed softly. You were always the poet. Life too brief for silence. Robb touched sword hilt, new blade forged of Night King's shattered lance, dragon steel and ghost fire alloy. Give Ghost my thanks. Ghost keeps his own counsel, Jon replied, but his eyes glimmered. They embraced. When they parted, Robb descended, mount waiting. Catelyn led Winterfell contingent at head of line, Great Jon flanked, Garland carried banner where Wolf and Rose coiled around sword of starfire. Horns sounded farewell, deep and true. Gates opened. As procession wound away, Jon watched until banners vanished into tree wall. Snowflakes still drifted, but they melted when they touched the stones and the water trickled, singing a tune no ear had heard in 3 long winters. A new note had entered the world, fragile as first green shoot piercing thawed soil, but alive, insistent, growing. Jon turned to Wall's shadow where Watch brothers hauled blocks of ice for next repair. Onward, he whispered to echo that had carried Robb so far. And with renewed purpose he went to work, shadow of crownless brother disappearing into dawn's gold. Robb's return march moved like sunrise chasing night. Villages that had barred doors flung them open. Crofters lined roads waving flakes of bark scrawled with dire wolves. At Mole's town a midwife thrust newborn into Robb's arms and named him Edric in honor of Edmure Freed. At Winterfell, castle walls thrummed with hammers shaping iron for plowshares. Blacksmith Micken's apprentice had fashioned new roof trusses from melted Bolton racks. Catelyn Kiss said the stone of her parents' tombs and set about turning crypt passage into granary for southern grain. Banners of tall Hart and Risswell flew at dread Fortree-born Heartwatch, its ramparts painted white to hide old sins. Downriver, Lord Manderley's ships escorted Dornish galleys bright as parrot wings. Prince Trystane disembarked at White Harbor under canopy of pale blue silk, gold rose petals drifting in spring breeze. He knelt before Robb, pledged spears and scimitars. Farther south, Tyrell engineers finished patching Red Keep's scorched stones. Olenna stitched letters to every corner of realm inviting them to the Great Council of Dragonstone. Even Stannis Baratheon, bitter and burned, sent Raven agreeing to attend if given safe conduct. One afternoon Robb stood with Marjorie upon Winterfell's rebuilt battlements. She was heavy with child, face radiant though weariness shadowed beneath her eyes. Below, gardens sprouted first green shoots, tended by small folk whistling reach harvest tunes. Marjorie pressed his hand to her belly. He kicks, she said, laughed soft as leaves. Or she. Hard to tell. Robb felt flutter, wonder swallowing words. He stared at distant tree-line where wolves once called and would again. The world trembled on cusp of spring, of peace, of stories yet unspun. I think we will call her Lyanna, Marjorie murmured, if she is girl. Jon told me tales. Robb's throat thickened. He nodded, kissed her temple where wind toyed with strands. The sky was vast, no longer pewter but pale washed blue. Rooks wheeled, cawing gossip to newborn sun. Somewhere south, Tywin Lannister nursed grudges. Somewhere east, dragons stirred. Somewhere beyond horizon, waves broke on shores unknown. Yet here, in this moment atop ancient stone, a king held a queen and within them beat 2 hearts, 3, a realm of countless. Robb closed eyes, listened. Smith's hammer rang, children laughed near practice yard, Marjorie's pulse throbbed under his lips, a rhythm older than war, stronger than steel. He opened eyes and breathed the northern air, alive with promise. Onward, it whispered. Always onward. And Robb Stark, king of Wolf and Rose, smiled to meet it.